to the engagement portion of the presentation this evening. So as this is pulled up, we will get started.
We can try and switch it. He's just trying to make it big. Not sure.
On the bottom of the screen over near the Zoom feature, there's a slideshow button. You should be able to click that and it'll make it full screen. And if that doesn't work, we can move forward like this as well.
That could be in Stewart Ranch or something. Southern Trinity.
Okay, we can go on to the next slide. And the next one. So first, I just want to introduce myself and the rest of our team this evening. My name is Brent Gibbons. I'm the senior project manager with a firm called Mintier Harnish. We're a planning consulting firm based out of the city of Sacramento. Our firm has been around for 30 plus years. We primarily focus on large scale planning efforts. So general plans, specific plans, community plans, housing elements, and zoning code updates. The three gentlemen you see here on the screen, I'm joined by Jim Harnish. He is our principal and owner. He's here this evening. He'll serve as the project director. And then Michael Gibbons, who is not here tonight, he is our assistant project manager through this effort. You click next on the slide. So this just gives you an idea of the span of work that we've done across the state of California. All of the blue highlighted counties, those are county general plans that we have done. Mintier Harnish is the leader in county general plans within the state. So it's great to be part of this effort with Trinity County. All the red dots are all the different communities we've worked with over the past 30 plus years. Next slide. So it's not just the three of us on the prior screen. There's a larger team that works with us. I call them our teaming partners. We have Rincon Consultants. They're focused on the environmental portion, CEQA. We have Applied Development Economics with Doug Svensson. They'll focus on the economic development element and then other tasks related to fiscal health that results from this plan. We have Dynamic Planning and Science. They're going to focus on the safety element and other safety implementations that should be introduced to this plan. We have Martha Miller with Miller Planning Associates. She is going to be co-leading with Mintier Harnish the zoning effort of this update, which I'll explain. We have Green Dot Transportation. That's with Jeff Schwein. They're going to focus on the transportation and circulation element and other aspects of mobility within the county. And then finally, we have Encode Plus, and there are digital online component, and I'll explain that further as we go through the presentation. Tonight, we are joined by Rincon. Rincon will give a brief overview later in the presentation on the CEQA process and how their work flows in. If you have any questions pertaining to CEQA this evening, I will have Brittany, who's here, answer those questions. Next slide. So the topic for tonight is kind of broken down into 5 steps. We're going to go over the general plan, the zoning component, so provide an overview of that, each of our teaming partners, walk through the project process, walk through community engagement, and then we'll open it up for not only public comment, but discussion with you, the commission. What we'd like tonight is to get your thoughts and opinions on outcomes, expectations, challenges you think that might be addressed through this process, but not just challenges, but we also want to look for opportunities that we should capitalize on as part of this. This plan is looking out to the year 2050. So there's a lot of time frame and ground to cover. And I'll get into the different elements in the process that's been done with the county so far up to this point. Next slide. And next one. So what is a general plan? Planning Commission, I hope you're familiar with this. The general plan is a guiding document. The state of California requires that every city, every town, every county has one. I think the best way to think of a general plan is it's a long-term blueprint for a community. It's a framework. It's general in its terms. It sets forth a vision that you look toward and where future decisions will align with. And it also includes a series of chapters, or what are called elements. Each of those elements are on specific topical areas that I'll get into in a more granular level, but they will align with future goals, policies, and then what we like to call implementation programs. And those are like your checklist moving forward. Those implementation programs are eventually voted on by the board and then help guide decisions over the next 20 to 30 years. So Trinity County has not had a full comprehensive update in quite some time. If you have had the ability to look back at your elements, you'll notice that they span a good 40 years. So this is actually a monumental process that the county is undertaking. And it's great to have all of the elements evaluated at the same time for compliance issues and just to make sure that everything is consistent, cohesive between all the different portions of the plan. Next slide. This is probably one of my favorite graphics because I think it explains a general plan. To the layperson, a general plan is a pie in the sky document. What is the purpose and how do we actually initiate it? And how does it affect me? So I like to think of the general plan as the basis. So this pyramid, the general plan, is the bottom. That is where everything tears off or is implemented from. So from your general plan, you have general policies, hint general in the name, and then you have your zoning code, which implements your general plan. A zoning code gets into development regulations, allowable uses, design standards, administrative processes, and so forth. You're very familiar with that as the Planning Commission. That is one of your guiding documents that you evaluate projects. From zoning, we move into subdivision. So that goes down to another granular level of detail. And from there, building permits. So you can see how the general plan needs to be consistent so that everything that tears off of it is consistent as well. So this is the bigger effort that we're starting. General plans typically range in time periods of 20 to 25 years. It's been a bit longer for Trinity County, so this is a great opportunity to reevaluate several items in this pyramid shown on the screen. Next slide. So the state has some guidance that they like all communities who are undergoing a general plan update to include and consider. And that's through what's called the general plan guidelines. This is put out by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, otherwise known as OPR. And what they ask is that all general plans include discussions on these topics that are shown on the screen, everything from land use, housing, open space, safety. Now, you don't have to necessarily have a element or a chapter related to each of these, but your general plan does need to cover each of these topics and needs to have guidance on how the county will address each of these issues. So as part of this effort, we're going to ensure that the revised and updated county general plan includes all of these where relevant and necessary. Next slide. And then we get into the state requirements. So this is the part where we want to make sure that the general plan is completely legally compliant. So if you click through this, it's actually going to come up with several icons on the screen. Here we go. I'm not going to go into all the state laws that have come into effect since the general plan past elements were adopted. Hundreds of state laws are put forth every year. This is just a snapshot of the topical areas where the most recent legislation has come into play. Everything from environmental justice, looking at disadvantaged communities and access to utilities and services, tribal consultation. We get into the evaluation of roadway systems and traffic and circulation networks through vehicle miles traveled. So that we will cover. And then a whole host of new legislation dealing with safety issues, flooding, and especially wildfire and evacuation routes, which is very pertinent to Trinity County. So there will be a big emphasis on that as part of this general plan. So there's a lot of state laws that we're going to cover just to make sure that the county is covered moving forward. Next slide. So why update the plan? This is a question that through the engagement so far through this process, I've been asked, why are we doing this now? Well, this effort has been tried a few times before. And now there is the will and the drive of the county to push forward and to complete it. Currently, your general plan is not legally compliant when it comes to current state legislation, and neither is the zoning ordinance that we're taking a look at. So this is our opportunity to take a holistic approach at updating it just to make sure that everything is covered. Also, times have changed. So one of your oldest elements was last developed in 1973 or 74, if I'm correct. We're in 2022. So we want to make sure that the residents of Trinity County now, that their vision and expectations are carried through this plan, because it might not have been the vision and expectations 40 years ago. Also, it's important that there is participatory community engagement as part of this effort. I said this during the board meeting. I can understand Trinity County at a data level. I can understand it through charts and through metrics, but I'm not a community member. So this is not my plan. I'm here to help the community, the Planning Commission, and the board facilitate a process that meets the community's needs. So we want to make sure that as part of this, engagement is integral and is a pillar of this entire process. And I'll get into all the different engagement events and all the areas that we're covering, trying to make sure that we're getting as many voices in this process as possible. Next slide. I think at the end, the important thing too is to produce a plan that is contemporary, reflects best practices, is easy to understand and read. If you've had a chance to read some of the elements, there's some outdated language. There's a bit of jargon. I like to call legalese. We want to remove that. Everybody should be able to read and understand what the plan is trying to initiate and the vision is trying to achieve. Also, there are several other special areas and needs that have been called out through this process. They're listed here on the screen that talk about resource emphasis, aligning uses that are not consistent. So we want to make sure that everything is internally consistent. I think this is important to point out. These are some of the other county general plans I had mentioned. We're very familiar working with rural counties, Trinity County being one of them. So we have that specialized knowledge and background working with rural communities, which makes us a really good fit. Next slide. So the focus of the general plan, primarily land use. As you're aware, a majority of the county is public, federally owned land. There are no incorporated cities in Trinity County. So this is a unique effort because we're looking at unincorporated areas with unincorporated communities and how do we cohesively bring them into a document that represents everybody. Focusing on transportation and mobility, looking at economic diversity and how do we boost economic development and align it with other county processes that are currently underway. Emerging trends is really important too. We want to make sure that we're writing new and innovative ways for planning, but then that fit the atmosphere of Trinity County, because Trinity County is not Central Valley, Trinity County is not the Bay Area, and it's not Southern California. So we want to make sure that it is unique and fits the needs of this area. Also, we want to make sure that the plan is fiscally stable. You can promote tons of programs, tons of policies, but if the county can't complete them based on a fiscal level and fiscal health, then what's the point? So as part of this, we'll be working with Planning Commission and with the board and the county staff to ensure that the plan can be implemented and is realistic and achievable. Next slide. So these are your existing elements as they stand now. Open space conservation, I was right, 1973. All the way through the housing element, which is the most recent, that was 2020 as part of your 6th cycle. So we're going to evaluate all of these elements and carry them forward. There's going to be some new elements as part of this plan as well, looking at an economic development element being one of them. So looking at different ways to boost economic development in the county that meets the needs of those employed here, and then other businesses you're looking to attract. Next slide. So the steps of a general plan, this is just your typical 8-step process. So we start off with what I like to call a diagnosis. You can't start a general plan process unless you know what has worked and what has not worked. So as part of this, our team is working with county staff to go through what's called the general plan audit. And what we do is we pull out all of your goals, your policies, and your programs from all your existing elements, and we evaluate them. Have they been completed? Are they working? Is it clear to understand? And that takes months to achieve because not everything in your general plan is outdated. Not everything gets tossed. There are some really good ideas that are still integral to the county that we want to carry forward. But we're going to rely on county staff to help highlight some of those areas that we should move forward into this next plan and others that maybe are bygones and should get removed. From that, we do what's known as a research and analysis, and there's a deliverable that comes out of that, and it's called the background report. Think of a background report as a snapshot of existing conditions, 2021, 2022. So what we do is we look at what's on the ground today. What are your economic conditions, population? What are your hydrology, water conditions, safety conditions, land use? And all of that is compiled into a background report that we're preparing now, will be out towards the end of the summer, early fall. And that actually sets the setting for the remainder of the project. That gives us a lay of the land and a better idea of other policies, goals and policies that we should address through this effort. Also, the background report's important because it will serve as the existing setting for the EIR later on in the process. We're a bit of ways out from that, but that lays the foundation for the environmental review. We move into an issues and opportunities phase in discussion. We're actually starting that now, so we're in between a few phases. We start to look at what are issues that the community thinks the general plan should address and what are opportunities we should capitalize on. And then what are other areas that maybe aren't in there now that we should consider. That'll lead into a vision statement and guiding principles. So as part of a plan, you want a mission statement, a vision statement. Where are we going? Where are we heading? And that is collective. So that covers a vision statement for the entire county. So that's going to be quite a big process. That'll start most likely early next year. We'll get into policy and land use alternatives, looking at different communities and impacted change that could occur. This phase is still in a bit of flux. We've heard through a lot of the workshops that we had last month that community plans are extremely important as part of the county and the identity of all the unincorporated communities. So right now we're working with the county on looking at different ways and methods that we can involve more community planning processes. So still more to come on that effort. 6, this is our action. This is where we prepare what's called the policy document. This is where all the goals, policies, and then further implementation programs are located. This is the meat of a general plan in essence. Following that, environmental review through CEQA, and then what we all hope for is adoption at the end of the process. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot of a general plan audit. This is actually the county's general plan. This is the safety element. So this just gives you an idea of how we evaluate each goal, each policy, and each program moving forward. So this is a painstaking process that really allows us to gather the necessary feedback to prepare other parts of this project. Next slide. I'm going to just breeze through this portion since Recon will touch on this later on, but later through the effort, once we have a plan, we need to make sure that we understand the impacts that may arise from it. The 2021 CEQA guidelines are our benchmark book to make sure that we are evaluating and mitigating this project. And I will have Rincon touch on that in a few moments in greater detail. Next slide. So I'd mentioned zoning, and this general plan is the primary piece of this project, but there's also a zoning component to it as well. And I'm realizing I'm probably jumping the gun because this says web-based. So let me back up a little bit. As part of this effort too, it's important that a general plan is accessible. I've been a local planner for a county and for a city, and I've seen a general plan sit on a shelf, and I've seen it not used. And that's not what we're looking to do here. We want to make sure that everyone can access it, everyone can read it, everyone can understand it, and that decision makers use it moving forward. So as part of this process, we are working with the county and developing a web-based general plan and a web-based zoning ordinance. This is through the Encode Plus platform. What this does is this takes the general plan and makes it interactive, online, fully searchable, and allows the zoning to be a fully searchable component too. This also takes some of the burden off of staff because the public can actually find their necessary needs with a click. So this is a very cool product. We've worked with Encode Plus on several other general plans throughout the state. Most recently, we completed a zoning code with Merced County that did a full digital zoning code. It's been highly successful. And so we look forward to working with Trinity County on this process. On the screen are just a list of some of the features that this updated online web-based version will include. Next slide. And then these are screenshots of what that plan will look like. This obviously is not Trinity County. This is South Carolina. but these are some other communities and counties that have similar efforts. So it'll be a standalone page that will include your zoning and will include, or Texas, I should say, include your zoning and general plan in an online format. Next slide. And this is another example. Next one. This is Merced County. This is their zoning ordinance online. So fully searchable. You can type in a use. I would have loved this as a planner, working at a counter. You want to know where you can raise chickens, you can type in chickens and it'll find everywhere where it's allowed. If you want to start to narrow down uses by zone, by parcel size, know the exact square footage your signage can be, you can select a zone, the type of sign, and it'll spit out all the calculations for you. It's pretty fascinating how far we've come. So this will be a great tool at the disposal of everybody. Next slide. So I'm going to walk through some of our teaming partner roles. They are not all here tonight. Well, Rincon is here, so when we do get to the CEQA portion, I'll have Brittany come up and explain their role on the project. But I can walk through some of the other components. So the next slide, please. So economic development, this is ADE, so Doug Svensson. Their primary role is focusing on a new economic development element. If you notice, when we looked at those guidelines put out by the state, economic development's not listed. It's because it's not a requirement by the state. So this is an optional element that we're pulling forward. Brand new, county currently does not have one. This will focus on job development opportunities, business attraction and retention, and then looking at diversifying the economy overall and different methods we can take. We do understand the county is currently going through other processes that are focusing on economic development. So this is the perfect time to try to meld all of those together and make sure that we're internally consistent on the direction the county is looking to go. Next slide. Safety is a big issue. Ironically, we were planned to initiate this project last year. We were planned to be at the fair last year. COVID jumped in the way, so there's a public health emergency. And as we all know, fires jumped in the way as well. So safety is a huge component for the county, and this is going to be a complete update to the safety element. There is also a hazard mitigation plan that is going to be compiled separately in the next year. We're going to work with that team to ensure that there's consistency between those documents throughout this effort. Dynamic planning and science will be leading the safety element. They'll be focusing on a number of goals surrounding wildfire, geologic, flooding, and natural man-made hazards that aren't listed on the screen. This will also cover climate trends, which is required by the state. So there has to be goals and policies that get into the effects of climate and change in weather patterns, which specifically for California, drought. So that will be covered as part of this effort as well. Next slide. Next slide. Green Dot's going to focus on the mobility and circulation throughout the county, and understanding that one of the big players at the table is Caltrans. So the county does not regulate all of its roadways. So this is an important collaborative effort with other regional and state agencies. We'll be looking at VMT, which is the vehicle miles traveled, which is a new metric of evaluating traffic congestion and mitigation. You typically see level of service, LOS, where you rate from an A to an F. So that is slowly being shifted out. VMT is coming into play now. Also, there'll be a traffic analysis that'll be part of the EIR, and other different innovative ways we can consider mobility options that fit a rural county will be considered and brought forth for community discussion and then potential implementation. Next slide. I'm going to take a breather from speaking and have Brittany come up and give a quick synopsis of Rincon and their role in environment and CEQA.
Thanks, Brent. You can have your water break now. I'm Brittany. I'm here today with Rincon Consultants. We're a team of environmental planners, and our role is 3 elements of the 8 that Brent mentioned. It's the conservation, open space, and noise. On top of that, I think we're all interested in the big EIR word. So we, as planners, are doing the environmental impact report, which analyzes potential impacts to this program, EIR, to the general plan update. And we will analyze impacts related to biological resources as well as cultural, which includes your early tribal consultation pursuant to AB 52. On top of that, we also do technical analyses using the best models and methodologies to analyze air quality, greenhouse gas emissions and reduction targets, and also noise. So the EIR will also be legally defensible. And as Brent alluded to, we want it to be an integrated process in the general plan update. So offering mitigation and a reasonable range of alternatives and streamlining as well. And that was brief.
Thank you, Brittany. You can go on the next slide. Here we are, zoning. Okay, I was definitely way ahead of where I thought I was. So we have a general plan that I've been harboring on so far, but there's a second component to this, and this is the zoning ordinance update. This is critical because the general plan will most likely have some sort of changes within it that will affect subsequent implementation tools, zoning being one of them. Also, it's important that zoning ordinance has not been comprehensively updated in quite some time. So as part of this, we're going to split this into a phase 2 effort. So next slide. And the next one. I already mentioned we understand rural counties. Okay, so as part of this approach, we're splitting it into 2 phases. So phase 1 is occurring now, and those are what we're calling zoning amendments. And phase 2 is a comprehensive update. So the part 1 is critical to make sure that the county is legally compliant. Right now, there are several parts of your zoning ordinance that are not. We want to make sure that we remove those and bring you up to 2022. These are technical amendments. We're not reorganizing the zoning ordinance. We're not changing land uses and allowable uses from their permit requirements. This is just making sure that new state law is reflected at a base level. And then there's some items on there that will be covering everything from density bonus affordable housing, making sure your wireless ordinance is up to date, signs and messaging. That content neutrality is very important. Right now, there are some signs that are shown that need to be removed. And then ADUs. ADU law has changed significantly almost on a yearly basis. We want to make sure that you're up to date. At the end of the general plan process is when we go into part 2, which is the comprehensive update. Comprehensive takes a look at the entire general plan in its entire zoning ordinance in its full breadth. So what we do is we take a look at full reorganization. We look at reevaluating all of your allowable uses, all your permit requirements, streamlining efforts, as well as other specific standards for uses that may be included as part of this process. That will also include web-based zoning, as I had mentioned, through Encode Plus, and we'll take an evaluation of all your administrative processes at that time. So we are a few years out from that, but that's going to follow the overall adoption of the general plan. Next slide. So what's important is we want to make sure that the general plan reflects contemporary standards, eliminates processes that are cumbersome and stall development, that it helps streamline processes for county staff, but also applicants, and then addresses the unique needs in different areas of the county. Currently, your general plan is in a more of a sentence structure and style. What we'd like to do is try to bring it into more of a tabular format, so it's easy to follow, easy to read. And what's also nice is you can compare the different zones and different uses. Sometimes individuals think that what's the difference between R1 and these aren't your zones per se, but like an R1 and an R12. Well, if you have a tabular format, you can see the differences by allowable uses as you move forward. Shown on the screen is an example land use table. This is from a code that was recently updated by our team in the Bay Area. This is more of a contemporary approach that we take. Next slide. Also, it's important that we show graphics that supplement the standards. Zoning codes, they are regulatory, but they can get wordy. So we want to make sure that when you're talking about a setback, you're talking about height, that the public understands what that means. And so if you can show a visual or graphic representation of that, that benefits everybody. So there will be, we will create graphics as part of this that'll supplement some of the language to make it clearer and easier to understand. As part of the zoning ordinance effort, think of it similar to a general plan. We do a diagnostic document review of your entire ordinance. We go through a fix-it list with staff. So what has been plaguing the staff for many years, what needs to get fixed. We review all your zoning districts, make sure they align with either new general plan designations or revised general plan designations. And then in the end, we actually update your zoning map. Next slide. These are just examples of different types of graphics that are used in several of our codes. So this gives you an idea. It will be a graphic heavy zoning ordinance moving forward, and that will even further benefit the online component to this process. Next slide. Next one. So the project process, here, if you click through, it should start to show the different phases. Keep going. So we're currently in phase 1, we're inching into 2 and 3 project initiation. This is where we start. We actually had a kickoff meeting a year ago, April 2021, and we've reinitiated the project this year, just based on delays due to primarily wildfire and COVID. Phase 2, that's our zoning ordinance. 3, that's the background report I talked about, where we provide the existing conditions. Phase 4 is your vision. Alternatives is 5. 6 is the policy document. 7 is your zoning update, and then EIR, and then adoption. I do want to point out that there's 2 colored arrows here. There's the orange arrow, and there is the purple arrow. Purple arrow covers community engagement. That runs throughout the process, whether it's a workshop, a pop-up event at, for instance, the fair where we're at now, or it is a public hearing. Those are throughout the entire process. And this process should take probably, I would say, 3 to 4 years to complete, just based on the size and scope and what we're doing. The orange, that's advisory involvement, and that runs through the zoning ordinance portion of this update, and then ends right before the CEQA portion. And I will get into what the advisory component is in a second. Next slide. So community engagement obviously is a huge pillar of this process, and there are certain methods that we're implementing as part of this county-wide effort. Next slide. And click again. Here we go. So you'll see that there is a logo. So as part of these projects, we have branding, which is important. We want the community to recognize the general plan, and that logo signifies this effort. The logo is actually based off a photo of one of our staff members who was hiking in the Trinity Alps. So we try to make things as local context as possible. So that logo is used on business cards. That logo is used on posters. We have a website. That logo is currently on my shirt. That logo is all over the fair. So when you see that logo, think general plan. So we're trying to build in that mindset that this is the process, and to follow whenever you see that, something important that has to do with this effort. Next slide. Business cards, we'll plan to give some to county staff. These are really important and nice to give out. They're small, they're easy. On the back is a QR code, which goes to our project website. This again is another technique to spread the word. The county is large, population is spread. So we like to hand these out through the process. So if any of the commissioners are interested, I can work with county staff to get you business cards to distribute at your leisure. Next slide. We do have a project website. You can keep clicking. It's trinity2050.com. Here's a screenshot of what it looks like. I would invite all of you to go take a look at the website. Think of it as the hub for the project. So all documents that go out for public review, all meeting notices, they'll be listed there. Anything with the project will be located on that website. Also includes FAQs and then links to other important county planning documents that are pertinent through this effort. Click again. I want to point out 2 things here. There's an orange box and a green box. They're on the homepage. One is an email sign up. So if you are interested in learning more about the general plan or want to keep up through the process, you can fill out your name, fill out your email. Those go straight to our team and you're put on a constant contact. So those who signed up should have received notifications of the fair. They definitely received notifications of the workshops last month. Any public meeting related to the general plan, they will be notified. And when a document goes out for review, there'll be a link in that constant contact so that they could review the document, provide comments from there. Next slide. Perfect. There's the green box. This is the comment box. This is important because if there's anything that the community is thinking of and wants us to know, put it in and click send. I get asked a lot, and I mentioned this at the workshops, where does my comment go? Your comment goes to my email, my phone, and my watch. I see them all the time. I know some community members tested it during the workshop. They were sending comments and would see me glance at my watch and see them roll in. This is important because we collect these throughout the entire process. For transparency reasons, on a quarterly basis, we download all of the comments, list them in a table verbatim, and post them to the project website. So the community can be aware of what comments are being submitted and what are the expectations everyone's thinking. They're actually great reads when you look through those. Those comments also help drive future phases and future ideas implemented as part of the project. Next slide. These are the email blasts that go out. This one was advertising the workshop we had on June 7th. So this is released through Constant Contact. You can sign up online. Next slide. Series of newsletters. This is newsletter number 1. The newsletter is available on the general plan website as well. These will come out at key milestones in the project, and it's just a brief overview. So if you just need a quick read to understand what's going on with the project, these are right up your alley. There are also hard copies of newsletters at the planning department as well. Next slide. It's also important that we use social media. So as part of this effort, we're reaching out to the Trinity Journal and other county social media networks. I'd ask all of you if you have any ideas on other outreach methods that maybe we do not have quite yet that would benefit this effort. We are more than willing to take all those ideas and work with county staff to spread the word even more. We've got some great feedback at the last workshop of some other avenues we should explore. Next slide. So we have workshops and pop-up events. Obviously, we're at the fair right now, so we are going to where the community is. It's not your typical workshop. It's not your typical workshop to where we ask the community to come to us. Now, it's important that the county is large. There are lots of different communities. It is just not Weaverville. It's just not Hayfork. It's not Trinity Center. It's not Higham Palm. It's everywhere. So as part of this effort, we are going everywhere. Workshops are done by supervisorial district. They're done within every community. So think if we do have a single workshop, it is repeated 5, 6, 7 times in different areas, going out and out on the community as much as possible. We're also working with county staff to look into other community events that we can join in on and be a part of to spread the word. Some community events are unique and tailored to certain areas. So we want to make sure that we cover all of our bases. So just like with different social media outlets, if there are any community events that the commission can think of that would be good for our attendance or to have a booth at or to have county staff attend, let us know and we can try to work that into a schedule. Again, we want to try to get as much of the community's expectations and voices heard through this process as possible. Next slide. And then we have, next slide. That's just a flyer. That says we're at the fair. There we go. So we have these advisory groups. So we started off with technical advisory groups. Those kicked into high gear last month. We had about 65 participants covering 6 to 7, 8 topical areas. The interest was huge as part of this. So what we've decided to do is to tailor them back to more of a focus group style. That way that we can facilitate those comments better. So we're going to have focus groups as part of this effort. They focus on different elements that are covered as part of the general plan. They will also be advisory to certain public documents that go out just to provide feedback. So those advisory groups will run through the remainder of the project, and they were that orange line that you saw on the project process bar. It is important to note that they are advisory, so any comments that they give will eventually go before you, the Planning Commission, for your consideration and recommendation, and then on to the board. Next slide. So I know that's a mouthful. It's a lot to talk about. It's a big process. So that concludes my presentation. I want to hand it back to the chair. If you have any questions for myself or the team on the process, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you for that, Brent. I did have one quick question actually on your last thing, the advisory groups. Who decides who gets invited to those and what does that makeup look like?
So the original advisory groups were determined with county staff, and they were technical in nature. So they were individuals who had specific understanding and knowledge in each of these different topic areas relating to public safety, relating to economic development, community health, infrastructure, and so forth.
So I've heard a lot of complaints about how those were selected and people that were left out. So
Who comprises that advisory committee? Is that county staff personnel, or is that private citizens, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination. So it is a mix. There are also regional agencies that are also included, just depending on topic area.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
Does the commission have any more questions for Brent?
I have a few. So one of the suggestions that I've heard is, so we have a lot of senior citizens who don't feel comfortable maybe going to public meetings and standing in front of the public, giving comments and stuff.
Sure.
Have you considered like a mail out survey? They're more comfortable sitting at home and writing their comments and sending them back in. So they don't do social media, QR codes don't mean anything to them. So how do you reach that population that's not computer literate?
No, I mean, that's very common in some communities that deal with a senior population, or some communities have certain groups that are not comfortable coming out and speaking in a public forum. We typically would do hard copy surveys that go out. The engagement program for this project is quite fluid. It's very open, and we would just need to work with the county to determine how we fit in different processes based on the feedback that we receive. A mailer, there are different methods to get that out to individuals, but that's something that we can definitely look into.
And then, so are you updating the existing community plans? Are you adding any community plans?
At this point, that's still a topic up for discussion. We're working with county staff right now to determine the best route that fits within the scope of this project. So the original scope did not include community plan updates, but we did hear overwhelmingly at our June workshop board meeting and the advisory committee meetings that community plans are of importance as part of this process. So working with county staff on how to fit that.
And then the background report that's out this fall, will that be on the website?
It will be on the website. Yes.
And will this PowerPoint be on the website?
Yes, it will.
Okay. So the Resource Conservation District, I know, just got a grant to do evacuation planning. Are you coordinating like with, these special districts like the RCD?
Mm-hmm. We are.
Yeah.
I've actually been in talks with RCD and talked with them again today. I also talked with the Fire Safe Council today as well. So we are making sure that all.
I'm the chair of the Fire Safe Council. I didn't hear anything.
Stopped by our booth and had a conversation
Okay.
about efforts. It wasn't
At the
formal.
fair.
Yes, you are correct. In an informal way, I should say, at the fair.
Okay.
It's important that all of these different efforts are coordinated. And so we want to make sure, working with each of these different agencies and entities, that we do bring them in through the process, because we are overlapping. So.
Well, I have tons of data too.
Yes, and we've been working with RCD to get a lot of the GIS data necessary.
Okay. So a lot of Trinity County, zoning wise, is unclassified. Are you going to be classifying that unclassified, all those unclassified parcels?
That is the biggest task of the zoning process, yes.
So that's a yes. Cool. The last one I have is, so which county staff is actually, your lead, or who are you working with?
Currently working with Skylar in the planning department, and then Ed. And we're currently working with CAO.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
I have just one quick question. Thank you for that presentation, very thorough. When you mentioned going to different communities and different districts, did you mean that you'll be going to a community in each district, or you'd be visiting different communities within each district?
So at a base minimum, we want to make sure that we do outreach within each of the supervisorial districts.
Mhm.
Then there are the communities within each of those. There is engagement outline for some of those specific communities, and then other ones would be more of a combined effort depending on location if communities are close together.
Cool. Yeah, because the district that where I represent, depending on the time of year, it could be a 3-hour drive from one part of the district to the next.
And that's taken into consideration. We try to put a lot of our engagement in spring to summer. Getting towards snow season, we try to avoid and work as much as we can on document delivery. It was noted that also wildfire season could be an issue too. That's becoming a secondary. So we are aware.
Thank you.
Right up. Thank you. We sure appreciate you guys coming in and giving your presentation. And it was very informative and the website looks great. I already logged on. So
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item 2. Okay, item 2 is an extension of time for P-22-15, a request for a 2-year extension of time for a subdivision of approximately 15.4 acres into a 5.1 acre parcel and a 10.3 acre parcel. Tentative map P-16-25 received an initial 2-year approval on June 8th, 2017. An additional 1-year extension of time was granted on April 11th, 2019, extending the tentative map expiration date to June 8th, 2020. A second extension of the 2 years extended the tentative map to June 8th, 2022. The applicant is currently requesting a third extension of time to June 8th, 2023. The project site is located at 531 Burnt Ranch Road in Sawyer Burnt Ranch Planning Area, APN 008-820-001. Applicant Tyler Thompson, planner Skylar Fisher. This time we'd like to hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Yeah, I'm just requesting an extension again, unfortunately, due to difficulties getting the project completed. I was before you, I don't know what it was, 2 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, in hopes of getting a modification that would alleviate any final issues to get the thing across the finish line, but that was not even close to the case. So here I am in front of a third planning commission members asking for another extension. So I am not going to do the finger pointing blame game or anything like that, but just that I'm diligently trying to get this completed, and I just unfortunately needs more time. I wish that was not the case. I would not like to pay for any more extension applications, would not like to take your time asking for them. So I don't know much else to say other than that. Yeah, I would like to get it completed as fast as possible, but here we are again. So I hope with more staff in the planning department, that might be a possibility. It's been very difficult over the last 5-6 years, whatever. 2016 was the application date for this, to get things move forward, as you all are well aware of, I'm sure. So there was, I believe other projects that were here tonight in some similar situations. Some were granted extensions without having to come before Planning Commission, I believe. I don't know how that works exactly. That would be fine with me as well. I would ask for a longer extension, as the previous planning director had asked for. She was fairly confident that the previous 2-year extension would have been significantly more than enough time to complete it. That was not the case. So I may see you again for another modification if that is necessary, which is also, in my opinion, unfortunate. But I hope that the final things can be checked off to get it completed. So I don't know if there are questions for myself, but
I do. Is the reason it's not getting processed due to you not providing information, or for the information not being processed?
I mean, it depends on probably who you ask. I would say I'm fairly diligent in trying to get that information provided. So yeah, I would say it's from the, information not being processed, or just the process itself not being not even explained, but just the request for that information not even being given. There was the original set of conditions, but myself having been a general contractor, I mean, very few projects go specifically according to an exact plan. There's always some issues that arise, some changes that need to be made. And it's been very difficult to make those changes as needed. And I feel like that's something that I would have hoped that the county could have done better, was to interact with myself or the engineering firm to make changes that were necessary along the way. So I have completed a lot of the work to try and get this done. It's just a matter of dotting some I's, crossing some T's, as well as making some changes that there was some resistance to, as well as just plain old nobody to make the request, the process, to even get a staff report generated, was quite difficult. To get the modification that I was here a few months ago took years, honestly. And I'm not, like I said, wanting to point fingers or play the blame game. It's just when there's a stack this big and there's only 24 hours in a day, there's no way it was possible to process everything that was before the county. And I asked at a supervisors meeting to possibly just grant extensions to projects that are in this status, that automatically, without having to have us take more of your time and more of staff's time creating reports, me have to file another or pay for another fee for another extension. I mean, I know that's not something that planning commission can necessarily do, but possibly agendize, request the board. But I just feel like there are several projects that were in this situation where it wasn't just due to somebody with their feet up on the couch, that it wasn't realistic to have them completed. So
Thank you for that, Tyler. Is there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you for your time. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to staff and just have your comments in regards to this.
Thank you, Chair, Planning Commissioners, and attendees in person and on Zoom. Before I get into the meat of it, when you were reading the agenda item, Chair Sharp, I realized that it is contradictory a little bit. It opens with saying it's a 2-year extension, then it says that it's going to extend to 2023. That was a typo on my end. This is a request for a 1-year extension to be consistent with the Subdivision Map Act, so I apologize for that confusion. So to speak to this project, this is P2215, which is the third extension of time for tentative parcel map P1625. This is a 2-parcel split of a parcel of approximately 15.4 acres. This is off Burnt Ranch School Road in the Burnt Ranch community. And you just heard the applicant, Tyler Thompson. The parcel is rural residential in zoning district and in general plan designation. The first extension of time was approved in April 2019. This was after the initial life of the project set to expire 2 years after it was approved on June 8th, 2017. The second extension of time was approved on June 11th, 2020, which was for an additional 2 years. And that brings us to today. So Mr. Thompson timely applied for a third extension of time, which this application is for. There is an attachment in the staff report, which is the letter that Mr. Thompson submitted for this project. And we believe that this project is consistent with the provisions of the Subdivision Map Act. So in addition, we also believe that this project is exempt under CEQA, given section 15061B3 under the general rule exemption. This is because we're under the impression that an extension of time has no possibility of new significant impacts. So all of that being said, staff recommends that the Planning Commission make a motion to adopt a CEQA determination of a general rule exception and to adopt the recommended findings listed in Resolution PC-22-07. Thank you, and I will answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you for that report, Skylar. Is there any questions for Skylar?
If I may, Chair.
Yes.
So 2 months ago, this project was before us and there was mitigations for the driveway, turnouts and whatnot that were addressed here at the commission. Is it those mitigations that are continuing, or are there other new mitigations or prior mitigations that are holding this process up? Could you explain what is holding this process up?
So I do believe that it is the road conditions that were conditioned by the Department of Transportation. So there have been an ongoing discussion from representatives from the Department of Transportation and the applicants, agents, engineers on making sure that everything is consistent with their standards and also isn't like overly onerous on the applicant in meeting the conditions of the map.
So the discussion before us 2 months ago that spelled out the conditions, there's more clarity and more discussion that is unfolding after our last commission meeting on those requirements?
So to my understanding, it is an ongoing discussion happening with the Department of Transportation and making sure that all of their conditions are met. I think that it's conditions similar to what went before the Planning Commission when the modification was presented before you, but it's also having to do with making sure that other aspects of the road conditions are met as well.
Other aspects that weren't brought before the Planning Commission?
I haven't been part of the meetings on like working out those conditions. I'm not sure if Tyler could speak to that. I know that he's met with Senior Engineer Pence, but.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions for staff? Okay. Thank you. Is there any public comment?
Veronica Kelly Albies, Douglas City. I just had a question looking at the agenda, whether it's an extension of time or is this a secret determination? Because I didn't see that in the agenda. So I was just confused on that. That's all I wanted to say. Tyler's great.
Did you?
So the project is an extension of time, but part of our request to the Planning Commission is to find that it's exempt. So we wouldn't need to, for example, prepare an environmental document to come to the conclusion that this project could have an extension of time.
Understood. Thank you. Does that clarify your question, Ms. Albies?
I guess I didn't know if it had to be agendized as a secret thing.
Is there any further questions for the applicant? Can I have a motion?
Yeah. I make a motion to adopt a CEQA or California Environmental Quality Act CEQA determination of a general pool rule exemption 15061 B3 and adopt a recommended finding listed, the findings listed in resolution PC-2022-07.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? We need a roll call.
It's a resolution.
Resolution, yes. Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Sharp, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you, 5-0, motion passed.
Good luck. I'm going to take a quick 5-minute recess. Okay, next item on the agenda is item 3, extension of time, P-22-17, a request for a 1-year extension of time for a conditional use permit, P-17-51. Originally approved May 24th, 2018 for SJH Timber, Inc., to allow the establishment of a commercial cannabis nursery located in the Trinity Alps Business Park, Specific Unit Development SUD District. The property has since been purchased by Cultured Cannabis, Inc., who was granted an extension of time to June 7th, 2021. The applicant was granted a second extension of time to June 7th, 2022. The applicant is currently requesting a third extension of time to June 7th, 2023. The project site is located at 271 Industrial Parkway in the Weaverville Planning Area, APN 024-220-055. Applicant Caden Koffler, planner Skylar Fisher. Can we hear from the applicant?
Did we click on him already?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Planning Commission, for hearing this item. Like the previous gentleman explains, the last place I wanted to be, asking for and paying for another extension application. Unfortunately, as he also mentioned, complicated projects that involve multiple agencies and multiple layers of development don't always go according to plan. And particularly with the state of the cannabis industry, that is even more highlighted. We still have 100% intention to see this project through to completion. We just had some setbacks in our investment plan and funding strategy, particularly as it relates to the collapse of the cannabis market over the last year. But we've found a new group of investors who are very interested in funding this because it's a nursery. The nursery is somewhat insulated from the rest of the market. Price per clone hasn't changed much. But they obviously are uncomfortable, putting money forth until we have a CUP in place. So for that reason, I'm asking another extension, trying to convey to you that, this project hasn't dropped off the map. We've been putting in hours and, money every month, every year to get this thing off the ground. We've just, suffered some unfortunate setbacks for reasons that are mostly out of our control, but cannabis market or cannabis industry is a complicated monster. And we've been trying to navigate it as best we can to get this thing done. But with an extension in place, we're fairly confident that the investment group we have interested now will help us get to building. And we've been in touch with Skylar and planning, and I've been trying to orchestrate a plan to phase the project out and get, one piece at a time built so that we're operating. We still think it's a great project. I think it'd be great for the city of Weaverville. So again, I'm asking for your blessing in another extension, and hopefully I'm not coming back again.
Thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to staff.
I'm trying not to hunch so much this time. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Chair, Planning Commissioners, and members of the public in person and on Zoom. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about P-22-17, which is a use permit time extension for a commercial cannabis nursery, which was submitted by Mr. Caden Koffler. The project is in the Weaverville Planning Area in the Trinity Alps Business and Industrial Park, SUD. and the general plan designation for this site is industrial. As a brief history of this project, it was originally approved on May 24th, 2018, which it got the typical life of a use permit to establish the use, which for this would be pulling a building permit and commencing construction of that building permit, or commencing establishing that building permit on site physically. The first extension was granted on September 10th, 2020, and it expired on June 7th, 2021, which was appealed by the applicant due to delayed staff processing times, because this was during the COVID-19 pandemic. The office was shut, and this appeal was upheld by the Planning Commission, which effectively extended the life of the project until June 7th, 2022. The applicant timely submitted another application for an extension of time to extend this project to June 7th, 2023. So if we were to look at the Trinity County zoning ordinance, as I'm always doing, section 17.32.050 discusses use permit time extensions. So if you were to look at it closely, the only metrics that it lists for needing to qualify or being able to qualify for a use permit time extension is good cause. So based on the precedent set on the previous extensions for this project being, lack of staff, which is still the case, the cannabis industry is currently not in a great state. So we believe that all of this in combination states that this would be the same as a good enough cause to grant another extension of time for this applicant, as he's also submitted his own letter explaining as to why this is necessary. He spoke to why this is necessary. He's been reaching out to local consultants to help him with this project, as well as submitting letters of support, which are in the staff packet as well. In addition, similar to the last project, staff determined that this project is exempt under CEQA, under the general rule exemption, section 15061B3. So all of that being said, staff recommends that the Planning Commission makes a motion to adopt the CEQA exemption, or the CEQA determination, of a general rule exemption, and to adopt resolution PC-2022-08 to approve the extension of time of P-17-51, which is the original use permit. Thank you, and I will answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Skylar. Is there any questions for staff? No? All right. Is there any public comment? Thank you, Skylar. I appreciate your comments. Is there any public comment?
Veronica Kelly Albies from Douglas City. I was at the original 2018 commission meeting regarding this project. And there was a great deal of concern at that time about the closeness to the river and water. That was all discussed at that time. I was at the one in 2021, as were most of you, except for Carol. I just want to bring up some points from that last meeting, in that I know Commissioner McHugh had asked if where they were at on their building permits, and they said that they had their consultant and their building person ready to roll. And I know there have been things that will always come into play with this stuff, but just trying to remember everything year to year to year. What has been done since the October 14th, 2021? Have they had a chance to submit any new site plans? Because the one in today's packet is the same one from 2018. And from what I remember and what I saw on the tape from October, was there were some concerns that some of the changes they were hoping to make would not fit with the CUP, and that they might have to start over. There was some of those discussions. Not part of that. I don't know if that's still an issue. I see they have TDCE has a quote in here. I don't know, question, have they been, has that been executed and they're ready to roll with the new investors? And let's see. And one other question. They're here again. They're timely. They're on it. And so they seem committed to the project. But these are just things to ask when you're looking at the good cause for any project. I think I just brought up some of the things because there's already another project similar that will be in that same area. So for me, I'm always density. But it was a good project at the time in 2018. They were ready to mitigate the issues that the public had. It was then sold, and this is the new owner. And I hope that the project will go through. But spending a lot of time on the phone is one thing, and I know staff has been hindered many projects. So just things I wanted to kind of have on the record because I remembered what they said at that last meeting, and I just wanted to say how I hope that this project moves forward. There's new investors in this letter that say they'll do it as long as you grant the extension. So I do hope it moves forward because I know that the industry needs this. But just as we continue to draw out things, as you say, with staff, I think sometimes these projects get drawn out for whatever reason as well. So I don't want to have it entirely pinned on staff because I know, especially now, the new staff has been responsive that I've heard from and that I know of. But just wanted to bring those comments up. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other public comment from the floor on Zoom?
Tom Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Tom Blanco, Douglas City. Just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair. As you probably recall, when this came up for the last extension, you had recently finished processing my conditional use permit, which is the neighboring parcel right there. We're 311 Industrial Parkway. And I think all the members of the commission were there except Commissioner Fall, who didn't get to hear Commissioner McHugh say, if this comes back again, you better have a very good reason. Number one, I don't see a good reason. We got our conditional use permit. It was appealed. This commission issued it in June of last year. It was appealed to the Board of Supervisors. So we finally got it on July 30th of last year. In that time, we have applied for and been issued our county nursery license. We've applied for and been issued our county distribution license. We've applied for and been issued our state distribution license. There's been no kind of progress like that from Mr. Koffler. Furthermore, as the previous speaker pointed out, the site plan amendments they're talking about certainly pull this out of the way of a CEQA exemption on the general rule exemption. This was an appropriate MND for 2018. This was the first CUP issued for cannabis in Trinity County. There is no way the MND would pass muster today. And I don't mean that it was poorly done then. It was done according to the way we were doing things in 2018. That MND, it's not part of your packet, it was 14 pages long. 1-4. You can't even get an Appendix C for less than 10 times that these days. In contrast, the staff report for my project next door was 262 pages long. So the level of analysis in the post-programmatic EIR world is far more complex. The TVCE quote, among the things it says, is LSA permit application. There's no way you can even apply for a CUP without having fish and wildlife taken care of by this point. In fact, a condition of approval for this permit, which again is not in your packet, but I have in front of me, condition number 6, a lake or streambed alteration agreement, LSAA, or written verification that an LSAA is not required shall be demonstrated by the applicant prior to issuance of the use permit. So this use permit should never have been issued if they don't have an LSAA. If he's that committed, if his investors are that intense, if nursery's that great, let him come back when he's ready, apply for a CUP that accurately reflects what he wants to do and the conditions in the county. I
Thank you,
think
Tom. Your
this is
time
a
is up.
definite contrast.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Blanco. We appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else on Zoom? Thank you for that. This time I'll bring it back to the commission. Is there any comments from the commissioners? I have some. I was actually here at that last meeting and all the same things were said. Mr. Koffler, are you still on Zoom?
Yes.
Thank you. I do have a question, and I did see that you had gotten an estimate from TVCE, but have you actually employed them?
No, because I mean, why are we going to spend money on something that could potentially be denied? And back to the back to square one. So they're ready, and they've given us that proposal to get this thing to building permits, and the investors are ready as well. But we were waiting on the decision tonight, essentially.
I noticed your proposal reads June 7th, 2022. So you didn't engage them prior to June 7th?
No, but I've been in touch with Dwight Stewart, who's a local contractor, who's done a lot of work. You're probably familiar with him. And he was the one that put me in touch with them finally. But I've been talking to Dwight for the last year about managing and leading the effort on this project, which he is actually doing, which is why he brought me to them. And they finally got me a proposal. So that's how that came about. And if I could just speak to a couple of comments that Mr. Blanco made. We were originally exploring the idea of changing the site plan or the design, but since then we've mixed that and we're back to the same design that was approved in the original CUP. That's all we're trying to implement at this time.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there any other comments?
If I could just add, once you start looking at how complicated this process is and how much it costs and how many things are involved, it gets a little bit, it starts to become a timely process. And that's just what's happened. It's not that, we haven't reached out to Fish and Wildlife or DOT. I've had contact with all of them. I've had contact with potential operating partners. I've had contact with engineers, builders, etc. Right? This is an ongoing process that we've just been trying to piece together in the right manner. And it's become increasingly difficult given the state of the cannabis industry right now. If this was 3 years ago, we're in this position, it might be different, but it is what it is. We're here now, but we're still committed to getting this project done. But obviously without a CUP in place, there's nothing we can do.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for staff. One point that was brought up that is pretty concerning. Is the MND actually valid at this point?
So given that the Planning Commission voted on and approved the MND, then that would make it valid. So, and I also wanted to clarify that the site plan included in the staff report is not like requesting a modification. The only objective of this project is to request an extension of time. So if there were any modifications of the site plan, that would need to come back to the Planning Commission for Planning Commission review. So that's why we say that this project is exempt, because we're coming to this saying that, hey, this project already went through the CEQA process. It was already evaluated by the Planning Commission and a determination was made. So this is just only for the extension of time.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question. So if the extension was not granted, and the applicant reapplied, what would be a different document or a level of evaluation that would be presented to us if they pursued reapplying?
So if this use permit extension of time was denied, then the applicant would have to start again at square one. I haven't worked on a project like that before, but in theory, like if there is an existing CEQA document that was approved, if that would need to be recirculated again, if the project were to change, for example, if the project description, or if they will want to modify the site plan to a point of significance, then that CEQA document would need to be recirculated. But when the project were to come to the Planning Commission, I would have to do a little bit more research on what the voting procedure for that would be if for example, if they didn't want to modify the document and it had already been approved.
What would you say the matrix difference is from a CEQA document produced in 2018 to a CEQA document produced in 2022?
So working on cannabis projects presently, I think that the cannabis program in Trinity County has been established for a longer period of time. So like when agencies submit comment, they like take that into consideration. Like for example, incorporating aspects of the cannabis program EIR into the CEQA document, or referencing more aspects of the cannabis code. But I mean, in essence, CEQA hasn't changed, like the review process hasn't changed, but I think because the cannabis program in Trinity County is older, we associate that with a higher level of review, even though that's not like the case. Like we expect the same level of review in 2018 as we do today.
And what is the application fee for an extension versus the application fee for starting all over again for a CUP?
So for the extension, I believe it was just a few $100. I don't have the fee off the top of my head. I apologize. But if they were to, let's say they had to resubmit an application for a commercial nursery and they couldn't use let's say they couldn't use their existing CEQA document. Again, I would have to do more research to get back on you on the logistics of that. But if they were having to submit a new CEQA document and evaluation, it would probably cost thousands of dollars for the applicant.
But just the application fee itself, what would that be? Yeah, like assuming that the CEQA document was valid, but you would open it up for, public comment again and things like that. But what is the difference in the cost to the applicant to apply for an extension versus to apply for a new CUP? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
There'd be a few $1,000s.
The fee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Is there any other questions for staff? Okay. Thank you, Skylar. I'm kind of leaning towards, denying the request for the extension. Just for the sheer fact of honestly what he speaks about in his letter, which is the market. And the market is certainly not trending upward. So I don't see how his matrix is going to change from this year to next. And he stated that, he doesn't want to invest money in something that isn't certain. And that's why he hasn't engaged any consulting firms or hired or done anything to move forward on his project from last year, which he certainly could have. And that trend has been the trend for the last year. And I think we all know that. So I just don't see a whole lot of commitment to the process other than wanting us to keep extending the process. I just feel like this project isn't moving forward and I don't feel like it's going to, based on the market and based on his own statements.
Well, to me, the CEQA question is what bugs me. So if the current CEQA document is satisfactory, so he hasn't committed to hiring the engineer or the, contractor or anything. He's got investors, lined up, but, they're still sitting there. So if the difference is, that he's going to have to pay more money to reapply, and if the CEQA document is satisfactory, okay, that's that's the difference. But if the CEQA document isn't satisfactory, then I think that's something we need to know, whether or not those agencies need to provide more input, whether or not the public, still has concerns. So that's the sticking point for me, is whether or not that CEQA document is still comprehensive enough.
Well, I couldn't disagree more. The CEQA document as it reads is current and in effect, and it's not for us to stand in the way of potential development in the community and not to close the door on a already struggling business. The applicant has jumped through all the hoops. His reservations about spending further money is not our concern. That's his business plan. He has already jumped through the hoops and through no fault of his own. The market has crashed. Granting an extension to this gentleman is no different than granting an extension to anyone else. It's not for us to count his money or shut the door in his face. He's already jumped through all the hoops, and I believe we should give him some extra time to meet his goals.
He's not changing the site plan. He's just respectfully asking for an extension to the project that we have already approved. He is, when the economy imploded, he is continuing to find ways to push forward, thus reaching out to investors to continue this process. As a commissioner that's representing a county that has a huge lack of jobs, any prospect of employment that has vetted our process, where there is not a large commute, it's right in town in industrial zoning. It seems like us granting a continuance for him to have one more year of opportunity is not hurting anybody.
Agreed.
I have a question for staff. How many extensions can we apply for? Can people apply for?
I believe it's unlimited.
So the last time that we granted it an extension of time, this was kind of like a discussion item of, oh, is it just a year that they can have, or is it multiple extensions of a year? And it seemed that the agreement that we came to there was you can request a 1-year extension of time until you initiate your use, which in this instance, since it involves a building permit, like I said, that would be taking out a building permit and commencing construction or establishing that structure on the property, or it would be until you ask for an extension of time and the planning commission denies it.
Thank you for that. So I do happen to agree with Commissioner Fall. And I think as commissioners, we need to consider, yes, the man was good to go in 2018, 2019, maybe 2020. I don't know what the changes have been in CEQA and the processes, but I'm sure they have changed. And the reality is that projects coming forward to us 5 years ago, well, 6 years ago, 4 years ago now, excuse me. 4 years ago, the matrix and the conditions that you need to meet then and the conditions that you need to meet now change, and they continually change. So what was good then may not be good now. And the issue with extensions and continuing extensions for undisclosed amount of times is that you have these changes in building codes, in environmental code, in processes that these people might not be meeting now. What may have been valid then is quite possibly, and I would, guess aren't valid now. So I think we need to consider that as commissioners. It's not just about a business or stopping somebody from doing business, but it's about making sure that we're actually keeping people to a standard that we're required to have them meet as a planning commission. So I think we need to consider that and not just pigeonhole jobs or somebody's right to act in business, but what is good planning? What is good policy?
May we ask for clarity from staff? Director Connell, could you provide some clarity on changes in CEQA, or if this project is potentially not valid anymore, or just the concerns that our chair presents?
If I may, through the chair, Director Connell, Cannabis Division, Trinity County. So CEQA, this is really hard to articulate. Just like the building code, there are subtle changes that happen not to the CEQA law, but to CEQA process, requirements, guidelines. Our planning department, we get issued every, I think it's 2 years. It's on a biannual update cycle for CEQA as far as guidelines and protocols. As far as we're talking about this project, if a CEQA document is approved, it is approved. It is an environmental document. So the world doesn't change just in 4 years based on this project. So the project, in all hypothetical, because I was not here 4 years ago, it should have been through the entire CEQA vetting process. And for an example, Supervisor Groves maintains a conditional use permit for his wine, for his winery. Those conditions, when they were issued to him at the approval of his permit, have not changed, nor has his CEQA document changed in the existence of his total project. And so when we're talking about this in specific, this CEQA document should have evaluated all of this project in totality and look at its cumulative impacts over time. And as long as we can come to a less than significant and we can present that information to a commission and the commission adopts it, this CEQA document is vital and alive as long as this project is alive. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I think it does. I'm sorry, I didn't ask it.
Yeah,
but it
yeah,
clarified it for
thank
me.
you. That was, thank you for that clarity. Yeah.
Very clear. Okay. Is there any other thoughts or discussion? Okay. Do I have a motion on the table?
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion with staff's recommendations that we adopt CEQA determination of general rule exemption 15061B3 and adopt resolution PC-2022-08 to approve the extension of time of P-17-51.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Roll call vote. Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharp, how do you vote?
Nay.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote? Motion passed 3-2. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 4, cannabis conditional use permit and variance, CUP, CCUPT 3-2018-004, P-18-24, a request for approval to expand an existing typical 2 mixed light small commercial cannabis cultivation license into a type 3 medium outdoor commercial cannabis cultivation license to allow for up to a 43,500 square foot, 1 acre of mature canopy. The applicant has also applied for a variance concurrently with CUP as the cultivation area is less than 500 feet from the adjacent property lines. The property is located on a 54.5 acre parcel located in the unincorporated community of Douglas City in Trinity County. The physical address of this site is 55361 State Highway 299, Douglas City, and the APN is 024-090-018. Planner Skylar Fisher, continued from June 23rd, 2022. We have a memorandum on this from Cannabis Division, Sean O'Connell, asking for more time to work on this. Is that correct?
If I may, I figure it's probably just a little easier if I stand over here, so that way I'm captured. For item 4, we are requesting an extension of time. We are still working with the applicant to make sure that the project, as it's going to be presented to the commission, is in alignment with their goals as well as staff goals. And at this point in time, we just have not quite gotten there. I believe between me and Planner Skylar Fisher, we should be setting up a meeting with this applicant to make sure that we go over their initial study, receive comments, kind of lay out the process for them and get this eventually to you.
Perfect. Thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to open it to public comment. Is there anybody on the floor that would like to comment? Is there anybody on Zoom? Okay. We'll close the public comment. And can I have a motion to continue this item?
I'll move that we continue this item to an undetermined date.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay, item 5 is a cannabis conditional use permit and variance, CCUP T3-2019-021, P-19-21. A request for approval to expand an existing type 2 mixed light small commercial cannabis cultivation license into a type 3 medium outdoor commercial cannabis cultivation license to allow for up to 43,560 square feet, 1 acre of mature canopy. The applicant has also applied for a variance concurrently with the CUP as the cultivation area is less than 500 feet from the adjacent property lines. The project is located on 143.6 acre parcel located in the unincorporated community of Sawyer in Trinity County. The physical address of this site is 5200 South Fork Road, Sawyer, and the APN is 008-080-032. Planner Skylar Fisher, continued from June 23rd, 2022. This time, we'd like to hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners, and staff. My name is Deidre Brower, and I am representing the applicant, Patrick Kahn. He originally submitted this back in early 2019. I was not involved at that time, and I got involved about a year and a half ago just to help facilitate the process. It has been through 3 planning directors, lots of staff, so I'm really excited to have this before you today, and I want to thank Skylar and the team for bringing this home. Thank you. Patrick was an early adopter in the program. That's how he's able to participate in the program being TPZ, because he had to enroll with the water board prior to August of 2016. So he was one of the first people to apply to the program, one of the very first to get a Fish and Wildlife agreement that many people put off for years because that was permitted at the time, which it wouldn't be allowed today. And that's why he's in the process of his second agreement now, because those are good for 5 years. And you may have noticed from the report that the newer agreement has fewer projects because he did complete the projects from his earlier agreement in a timely manner. There's been a lot of progress on the parcel, and while it is adjacent to the South Fork of the Trinity, everything is about 100 feet above the floodplain, so it's not affecting those waters down there. And I wanted to mention in the agency comments that some of the items from the Environmental Health Department have been addressed already and are in progress of addressing some of the others. CAL FIRE was out there last week, and so there's been continued progress. One thing I wanted to mention was for the cannabis division, it mentioned that there were lights, and that's because historically it's been a mixed light license and he was allowed up to 6 watts, but he's asking for the acre, which will eliminate the option of using lights for it as the current county ordinance reads. A couple other things I wanted to mention about the staff report. I was hoping for some clarification. In the conditions, number 6 states that failure of the permittee to make use of this permit within 1 year, some language shall result in the automatic expiration or termination of the permit. And then at the end of that section, it states that the approval will expire July 14th, 2024. So I was hoping for some clarification and asking whether that 2 years be allowed. I mean, we've seen 2 extensions requested tonight. And I don't think he has any intention of waiting 2 years, but just with the current climate and how things are, if we could get that through, that would be great and appreciated. One other item that was in there stated that there's a limit of 200 gallons per day for surface diversion, and that was really, it's only during the forbearance period in which there can be no diversions for cannabis during that period, but there can still be some domestic diversions. So I just wanted to clarify that. Additionally, I would like you to consider the 2 mitigation measures, Bio 1 and Bio 2. Bio 1 is regarding the foothill yellow-legged frog, and item 2 is for the Trinity bristle snail. And both of those species are located in the riparian area, not up on the above where the property where the project is. And so I do have a letter, maybe I can give this to Debbie, from Pacific Watershed and Associates, the biologist there discussing the foothill yellow-legged frog. And then in the biological assessment on page 24, it did state the occurrence potential for the bristle snail was only in those riparian areas. So I just wanted to ask for your consideration on those 2 measures. Additionally, as this project saw many a staff member, there is a letter of support from the closest neighbor. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention. She's been his neighbor for many years. And so there's, and that parcel also is has a license in Humboldt. It's right on the line. The nearest dwelling to the project is 1,000 feet away. And so I just wanted to point those things out to you and let you know that we're here to answer any questions that you might have. And I think Patrick would like to introduce himself.
Thank you for those comments.
Director and staff and planning. My name is Patrick Kahn. I'm the owner and have been participating and spearheading this project because we've gone through a lot of transformations with staff, with consultants. You know, this has been a long process. We've been in this for, I think, over 6 years. So if you have any questions about our operation or any nuances, feel free to call on me.
Thank you for that. Is there any, actually at this time, I'm going to turn it over to staff. Wow.
Thank you, Chair, Planning Commissioners, and members of the public in attendance in the audience and on Zoom. I'm going to spend the next few minutes discussing P1921 or CCUPT 319-21. This is a conditional use permit application for a type 3 cultivation license. So that would be the medium outdoor. And I wanted to kind of spend a moment discussing what Ms. Brower discussed in relation to the cannabis division comment in my opening of discussing what medium outdoor means. So Under the Trinity County Cannabis Ordinance, an outdoor license can include cultivation inside of a greenhouse, but there cannot be artificial lighting used. And so the applicant and agent have expressed that they will not be using artificial lighting. So this is consistent with the cannabis ordinance and the cannabis program EIR. And so if you look to the site plan in the attachments for this staff report, they indicate that they will be using a mixture of greenhouses and outdoor cultivation space. All that being said, this project is off South Fork Road in Sawyer. It is a timber production zone in zoning, and it is of the resource general plan designation. And I'll touch on the implications of that in regards to the project a little later. And so speaking to the existing site, it includes a single family residence, septic, groundwater well, 2 surface water diversion points, water storage pond, 6 water storage tanks, and cannabis cultivation activities. Now, Ms. Brower spoke earlier to the fact that this applicant has been in the cannabis program for quite some time. They're part of one of the 100 initial applicants, licensees part of this program. So that's what makes them eligible to cultivate within the TPZ zoning. And their existing license is mixed light, but they will be, again, going to the outdoor cultivation type. And their current footprint incorporates greenhouses outdoors and 1,500 square foot of immature plant area. Additionally, there is existing compost, shed for pesticide and ag chem storage, parking, storage, and harvest storage, admin hold, and processing within a shipping container. So the proposed development includes expanding the cultivation to up to an acre is what was scoped for in the environmental document. A 1,500 square foot barn for storage, 1,200 square foot shop for processing and immature plant area, a 320 square foot shipping container for harvest storage, processing, and admin hold, a second 320 square foot shipping container for immature plants, a solar array, a 1 million gallon water storage pond, and 8 5,000 gallon plastic water storage tanks. So that's going to be the proposed development on the site. Now, we wanted to make sure that we spoke really clearly on water availability on the parcel as it relates to the proposed cultivation activities. So there is roughly 693,000 gallons proposed use per year. 650,000 of that is going to be for the cultivation, and the remaining 43,200 gallons is for domestic use. But the water storage capacity on site is going to be 1,331,500 gallons. So there's going to be massive potential for water storage on site. Segueing from there, I wanted to touch on the existing lake and stream bed Okay. I wanted to speak to the lake bed or the lake and stream bed alteration agreement that was obtained from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in 2016. So this is something that is renewed every few years. It's currently up for renewal currently. And it specifies avoidance and minimization measures for water diversions to protect fish and wildlife resources. And so, for example, they cannot divert more than 200 gallons a day during the forbearance period. And also water withdrawal is subject to this forbearance period from April 1st through October 31st. So at the last Planning Commission meeting, this project was unfortunately continued because upon staff review, we realized that we didn't do our due diligence in routing this for relevant agencies and department comments. We have since done so and have included the comments received within the staff report. All in all, we received comments from the assessor's office, building department, environmental health, CAL FIRE. I know it says no comment, but that was their comment, was no comment. So I wanted to capture that. The Sawyer Volunteer Fire District, or Sawyer Volunteer Fire Department, and the Cannabis Division. This project was also circulated for possible tribal consultation, but we did not receive a comment from that circulation to meet the AB 52 requirement. A big bulk of the staff report is our amazing consultants, SHN, who we have a representative on call and who did all the heavy lifting on the staff report. I should have opened with that. Gary from SHN is amazing. So the two agencies which commented on this draft M&D when we circulated it to the state clearinghouse were the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Cannabis Control. So I kind of summarized what I believe to be like the main points of their comments and responded to them. So for CDFW, the first major comment was in regards to light and noise. And the response is, currently, given that there is no artificial lighting allowed in the canopy area to promote cultivation, and due to the provisions of the Trinity County Cannabis Ordinance in regards to reducing the potential impacts of light, we don't believe that this will be a concern in regards to noise performance standards. Both are more robustly explained in response to the CDFW comment to make sure that we fully capture that with mitigations, there will be no significant impacts related to light or noise. The second comment was in regards to the northern spotted owl. Within the M&D and within the staff report, we reference the Colorado State University data from 2020 and 2021, which indicates that there are not nearby NSO. Additionally, there was comment submitted in regards to the biological report, the BRA. And so the BRA has since been revised to incorporate their comments and make sure that it fully captures the county cannabis ordinance in its entirety. And there are conditions, because they spoke to conditions regarding the foothill yellow-legged frog, Trinity bristle snail, and nesting birds. So that is going to be captured within the conditions of this use permit. And additionally, adding surveys for roosting bat and western bumblebee are conditions of approval. Finally, they spoke to the existing LSAA agreement that has since expired. The comment submitted was stating that they were waiting on renewing the LSAA until this environmental document was approved, but that isn't necessary for the approval of an LSAA. So we believe that once the LSAA is renewed, then they would still be the same agreement. So we would still be seeing the monitoring in regards to avoidance and minimization measures for water diversions to protect natural resources. Moving to DCC, a lot of their comments was just making sure that the CEQA document incorporated the PEIR in basically every potential impact that we were looking at. So you'll see in the staff report, there's a lot of really tiny sections there for like aesthetics and et cetera, et cetera. So basically, like huge portion of those sections were updated to make sure that there is direct reference to the program EIR. In addition, they wanted a more robust discussion of cumulative impacts in regards to where this project fits and the whole scope of other cannabis projects happening in the county, which is like a big focus of the EIR, is saying, well, we're not just looking at, one license or another license, we're looking at all of the licenses together. What's the impact of that on the county? So we aim to reflect that in the revised draft M&D as well. Finally, there were comments in regards to emissions generated by vehicle miles traveled, which was also revised to incorporate a more robust discussion on that. Moving from the M&D comments. So I said that I would talk about general plan consistency a little bit. So the resource general plan designation is consistent with resource production and is identified as consistent with cannabis use with the establishment of the cannabis program. So we find that the general plan designation is consistent with the proposed use of expanding the existing cannabis cultivation on this site. In addition, we find that this site or this proposed project is consistent with the zoning and cannabis ordinance. So the ISMND, the draft ISMND, and conditions incorporate relevant measures of the commercial cannabis ordinance. So if you go through like condition 19 through like, I think 54 of this, of the conditions page, a lot of them is just reiterating aspects of our cannabis ordinance to make sure that they're fully captured and conditioned on this project. In addition, as was already discussed, the TPZ zoning, if it met the existing, I wrote it down. If they completed the California North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board Order 2015-0023 by August 1st, 2016, which the applicant did, then they are eligible to cultivate on TPZ. And as stated already, the draft ISMND was circulated in the state clearinghouse. That's how we got the comments from DCC and CDFW. So we have met that requirement. So given the discussed, staff believes that the use permit is consistent with section 17.32010, which kind of provides guidelines for approving use permits, what makes them consistent with the code, not a threat to public health. And those guidelines are that this is consistent with sound principles of land use, not injurious to public health, safety, and welfare, and is consistent with the general plan. So moving on to the variance. So the way that we are regarding the variance in all projects is in as a public or a neighbor nuisance issue. So we want to make sure that no cultivation is going to be causing issues regarding health or safety, or just going to be a general nuisance problem to the neighbors. So as Ms. Bauer discussed earlier, the nearest residence to the cultivation is over 800 feet. But the proposed cultivation footprint is going to be 165 to 171 feet to the nearest property line. And so if we are going to be evaluating the guidelines for a variance, this would not grant the applicant special privilege in regards to the variance if a variance was granted for this project, as this would not be a use variance, as this use would be allowed on the parcel with a use permit. It would not be injurious to public welfare or the adjacent properties, and would not be adverse to the general or specific plans. And this is not in the RD1 overlay zone where variances are expressly prohibited. In addition to this, we gave planning commissioners and chair a memo that was submitted by the applicant and agent, which has a letter of support from the neighbor where this variance would be from, stating support for the project, that the applicant has never been an issue, has been a great neighbor. So we believe for these reasons that if a variance were to be granted for a project, then this would be a good project for a variance, because the cultivation from our evaluation would not present any nuisance issues or concern for the neighbor, and the neighbor doesn't have a concern for the variance or the cultivation either. So really briefly, I thought that it would be a fun exercise to cover the conditions on this project, only because a few times modification of conditions have come before this planning commission, and I figure if we hash everything out now, then maybe we don't have to hash it out again later. So really, really brief, not to go over all the pages of the conditions. So the conditions discuss the parameters of the variance, reiterate that the project must be compliant with all state and county regulations. For example, obtaining all necessary permits from county and other state agencies that are required for medium outdoor commercial cannabis activities. It outlines the appeal period, which Ms. Brower is correct that the 2 year is the typical time granted for use permits. So I'm going to recommend some changes to the resolution there. There are conditions related to impacts to biological, cultural, and paleontological resources, and necessary surveying, monitoring, and or reporting if these resources are found. For example, if there is excavation happening or development on the property and a fossil is discovered, that will need to be reported to the appropriate agency. And as stated before, condition 19 to 54 directly relates to the cannabis ordinance. Now going into the comments that were submitted by local agencies and departments. So we believe that building's comment of needing a building permit to be submitted for any structures that go on site is captured in comment 2. For environmental health, we believe that comments are captured in condition 9, 22, and 44. In regards to waste management plans.
Slow down a little.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thanks. Okay, 922 and
44.
Yeah, I can also read the specific conditions out loud if that'd be helpful.
and just let me figure out which ones.
So Skylar, as we go through this, you just clarify the page that you're on so we can keep up with you that way.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course.
Thanks.
So I'm just going to start, I'm going to backtrack a little bit to make sure everything is easy for review. So in regards to the building permit comments condition. So condition 2, which is on page 1 of Exhibit A, specifies that the permittee must be in compliance with all county building permit requirements, including but not limited to structures, roads, electrical, and water and sewer connections. And there's a little bit more there, but that's the meat which speaks to the building department comment.
There's no page numbers.
Exhibit A resolution.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I think we got that one.
Okay. If you go to the next page, underneath that big paragraph on variances, you'll see condition 9, which alludes to a wastewater discharge plan needing to be submitted and approved by the Trinity County Environmental Health Department. And this would account for sediment discharge, wastewater from cultivation, chemical storage, and the chemical sink hand washing requirements.
I think we're there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did we want, or I'll wait for questions. Okay. So if you were to flip your page once and then flip it again, on the left-hand page, condition which states section 17.43.060D, this condition discusses that the cultivation of cannabis shall not create erosion or result in contaminated runoff into any stream, creek, river, or body of water.
Okay.
And then if we were to flip one time and then one more time, this section at the very top discusses, I guess it kind of starts on the page before at the very, very bottom section, or condition 44, discusses section 17.43G.030EE, which is waste compost management. So this outlines the requirements for a waste compost management plan for the applicant. Perfect. So going from there, all the way back to the front page of Exhibit A, and then to the next page are conditions 10 and 11, which speak to the comments submitted by the Sawyer Volunteer Fire Department. Now, these conditions are that water tanks on site shall have outlets compatible with fire engine hookups. That's condition 10. And condition 11 is if there are any locks on gates to access the property or any combinations, that sort of thing, that the volunteer fire department be shared the combinations or possibly a key. So in case of emergency, they're able to access the property and respond. And in regards to the cannabis division comment, we believe that the, including the required mitigation measures throughout the document and specifying that this is an outdoor cultivation captures any concern regarding the use of artificial lighting in the cultivation canopy, as it is expressly not allowed in the Trinity County Cannabis Ordinance. Okay. All that being said, staff recommends to the Planning Commission that a motion is made to adopt a resolution to adopt the California Environmental Quality Act determination of a mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program above the the conditional use permit and variance for CCUPT 3 2019-021 based on the recommended findings in resolution 2022-06 and subject to the conditions of approval set forth in Exhibit A to resolution 2022-06.
Thank you, Skylar.
Oh, wait, I'm going to amend my recommendation for a second, sorry. The resolution is 2022-09 and my numbers game is off tonight, sorry. And staff recommends an amendment to the resolution in front of you to have the initial expiration date to be 2 years out for the applicant to have 2 years to establish the permit. Although in communication with the applicant, I don't think it's going to take that long. He seems on it. So that would be the amendment to the resolution. So my recommendation again is to adopt the California Environmental Quality Act determination of a mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and to approve conditional use permit and variance CCUPT 3 2019-021 based on the recommended findings in resolution 2022-09 with the amendments in Exhibit A to resolution 2209 and subject to these conditions. The amendment being that the period of time to establish this use permit is set to 2024. So there's a 2-year allowance for that.
So would that modify condition number 6? Or would that language change?
Yes, that would change it to failure of the permittee to make use of this use permit within 2 years. Sorry, thank you, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Skylar. It's a big lift. I had one quick question. At the top of that page, where it describes, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong, the following conditions of approval shall be satisfied prior to the issuance of any building permits. Should that be the prior to cultivating and building permits, or is that just building permits?
So currently, it's the issuance of any building permit. So that would be condition 1 through 11.
So does it speak to him cultivating prior to the issuance of these conditions being met?
It doesn't speak to that specifically in this line, no.
Does it in the ordinance? I didn't read that. I mean, I read the whole thing, but it's a lot to read. And so I didn't read that anywhere. And it seems like that's the purpose of this, right? So we can cultivate.
Yes, so all structures.
I mean, he would have to meet all these conditions prior to cultivation, correct?
He would need to meet all of the conditions from 1 through 11 prior to. So this condition is typically before the use is established. So if we want to specify that, we can.
I don't know. I would seem that it would be important.
Okay.
The other question I have is on maps. The maps that you provided don't indicate the other residents. It doesn't pinpoint it anywhere on a map where that residence is located. And also your maps that you've provided, there's no tope. There's no, I mean, I can Google Earth and I actually have it up here on my phone and I can see some issues, you know, with why he is where he's at with his cultivating areas. But it would be extremely helpful if we had topographic maps in front of us because land is not flat. So And it helps understand why the need for a variance would exist.
Okay,
So in the future, if we could get a tote map with these, and
Where is the house? I mean, it says it's on attachment 4, but I couldn't see any residents on attachment 4, the aerial map. Can you show me maybe? Or show us?
I'm flipping. So is the question, where is the residence on the map?
Yeah.
So on the aerial map, the residence isn't specifically called out, but if you were to look at the site plan, and this would be the second.
This is the adjacent residence.
Yes, so that, I'm sorry.
so we're looking for the residence that is the neighboring residence, the one that the variance is being requested for. So where is that on your maps?
So this variance isn't going to be from the residence, it's going to be from the property line.
Understood, but you speak to the residents neighboring it and the fact that it's 800 feet or 500 feet, whichever that was, from the nearest residence. So we're kind of looking to see where that nearest residence that you're referring to is.
Because it said it was on figure 4 or attachment 4.
Yeah, I was looking here and this is like a trailer.
When it says attachment 4, is that in the staff report or is that in reference to the draft MND?
It's in the staff report. I'm
Okay.
looking for it.
So at this time, it looks like the aerial map doesn't denote that. So if that's something that the planning commission would like to see, then that's something that the planning staff I can prepare.
Okay. I have other questions when you.
Yeah, when we bring it back to the chair, do you?
Technical question.
Is that what the applicant said? Yeah, okay. Okay, so I got an assist on where the residence is located. I'm trying to think of the best way to show you this. So I'll take a moment and I can hand you my map where I circled it.
Okay. Okay. All right, great, thanks. So, I got it.
So it is where that trailer is. Yes, the trailer.
You want that back?
Oh, you can take it. Would you like to hear from the applicant in regards to this question?
I don't think it's necessary.
This is some technical questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think, let's hold our, is there any more for Skylar? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So, let's see. So how many, this is a type 3?
Yes.
So how many have we issued so far and how many have been applied for versus the cap of 15?
I don't have that number on the top of my head, but I can research that and get back to you.
Are we getting even close to 15 or?
There's only 2.
If
Okay.
I'm through the chair, Director Connell, Cannabis Division, we have processed, and this is just off the top of my head because I don't have my numbers with me, but as far as type 3 medium cultivation license, I believe we are at, this would, if the commission decides to approve this, would make 4 individual medium licenses. We do have an application pool as we continue to work through those and bring them forward, that number will increase.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if we were even getting close to that. So as far as them being allowed to have this cultivation in a TPZ, they're supposed to have been enrolled, in the Water Quality Control Board order by August 1st, 2016. The ISMND says they provided a certificate dated July 13th, 2018. So I'm just trying to figure out what documentation there is that they were in compliance with 1743-050. Do you have that? I mean, if you have that documentation, that's cool. I just didn't see that in the report. So I was just trying to confirm that that was available.
We are getting that information for you presently.
Is there any other questions for staff while they're looking for that document? Commissioner Barrett, Commissioner Heaton,
Not at this time.
I just wanted to throw out
Commissioner McIntosh.
Not this time.
if there are any technical questions or in regards to the revisions of the draft MND, we do have Gary from SHN on call currently, and we could ask him any questions.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions about the water, how that's going to work, but I think maybe the applicant can clarify some of those.
So at this time, I'm going to let Ms. Fisher sit down, and we thank you for the input, and we will probably be coming back to you. And I'd like to open it to public comment. Is there anybody on the floor?
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners and staff. Thank you, staff, for bringing this. It has been through many iterations and different teams, and I know SHN is stuck with it also through thick and thin. I encourage approval of this project as conditioned. The conditions are extensive conditions of approval. I don't know if Trinity County's ever seen a project with this many conditions of approval. The applicant has done a good job of earning a reputation in his community as a responsible steward of the land and a good neighbor. He's been at it for years. Him and his team work really hard at being good neighbors and taking good care of their land. They've got a very multi-generational, long-term outlook when they do their planning and their execution of their project. And, he's basically agreed to all of these conditions, which is amazing that someone could commit to that. And, and I know Patrick will live up to his word on that. So I really do. This is one of those projects that should have been approved a long time ago. And I want to encourage the board or the commission to allow him and his team to get to work. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else on the floor that would like to comment? Is there anybody on Zoom?
Adrian Keys.
Thank you very much. I'd second what John said. I also believe that this project should be approved, and I don't have any of the documents in front of me, but I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that that 2018 date with the water board that you're looking at is when it transitioned from the North Coast Regional Water Board to the State Water Board, and everybody had to refile, everybody had to go through this weird process, transitioning all of our information over to this other agency and remain in compliance. In 2016, when Patrick applied, he applied to the North Coast Regional Water Board and was approved. In 2018, every cultivator in Trinity County with the Regional Water Board order transitioned to a State Water Board order. And that's what the documents say, because that's what our notice of applicability, that's what that says now. That's what we have to put on a renewal. Okay. That's what we put on all of those things. So that's my comment for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else on Zoom? At this time, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Patrick, can I ask you some questions? I'm just trying to figure out the water supply. So are you currently doing rainwater harvesting?
Yes.
Yeah, you are.
Our pond actually, with the construction, has done quite a significant job of collecting rain over the years. The pond was the first major construction that we did in this project. And so by starting at that point, it set in motion the 3-acre conversion, all of the necessary components to build out that pond. And so the pond is constructed with EPDM pond liner, and during rain, it actually collects quite a lot. And there are many years, even in this drought-stricken time that we've been experiencing, where it fills itself. And the only time that any creek is used is possibly just to maintain the system. You know, you're on a gravity system. It flushes the pond and what have you when there's just a lot of water happening in the winter.
So you're not really doing rainwater harvesting off your roofs?
I currently haven't set up to do that, but with the permitted greenhouses and the house, the thing is my property is about a mile from the river to the top of the property. It starts off about 500 feet of elevation and goes up to about 1,600 feet. And so it's like over a mile. When we started this project, this property was a mile by a mile, except for the short section that it turned out to be. So, you know, I want to stick to your question. So any questions there that I missed with the water?
Well, I was just trying to figure out, the volume that you were projecting from rainwater harvesting. Normally you would be picking the water off of, the roofs of the greenhouses or your barn or something like that. And the ponds are kind of slightly uphill from where your structures are going to be. So I'm just wondering, are you going to pump water from these collection, off of rooftops? Or were you only assuming that you're going to collect the water that falls directly on the pond?
Well, we're still assessing our use needs. We've been operating for 6 years and have found that the gravity system has been sufficient. And because it took so long to get power and such, we haven't really looked into integrating pumping uphill, but we have talked with consultants and engineers about doing that. And we're capable of integrating that very simply.
Okay, I think it's just a little misleading in the application to call it rainwater harvesting, because you're not really harvesting in the typical sense off of a structure. You're just collecting what falls directly on the pond.
And to be honest with you, that's a nuance that has slipped by me. Because if you were to look through any of my documents and LSAA documents, the pond is compliant with the forbearance period and collecting water and has no problem with that. But as the program has evolved, and so has the drought has become more, it's become more and more important to incorporate rain catchment into the systems. And so as I've built out, I didn't start off with any structures to do that from. I started off with a map of how to get the pond built and how to properly administer the pond in conjunction with the cultivation. And so we put the pond up there because it offers gravity water. And we didn't have power at that time. We didn't have buildings at that time. Now that there are permitted greenhouses and such, it isn't a stretch to incorporate those things in as a mitigation to using the creek or to using other sources.
Well, no, I'm just looking at the total volume that you were projecting. If you look at the surface area of the pond, versus the rainfall, and then you subtract evaporation and stuff, you're not going to get that volume of water. But by the same token, just so you, the most recent one of these that we approved, they were using 140,000 gallons for their 1 acre outdoor cultivation. So I think your estimate of how much water you need is probably way high.
So, and I agree with you completely. I've been working with a very reputable firm, PWA on the coast for all of my water needs consistently throughout my project. And when we moved to the state water system, it was sort of like the 3 acre conversion and many other things. You throw a Hail Mary, you go for what you need and you hope for better. So when we got our state order, it allows us a lot more water than what we thought we needed. And the same goes for building out another pond that is proposed, that's all in place with the water board and with the state ordinance. It's already approved to collect all of that water during the forbearance period. And we're hoping that with some of the combination of the greenhouses and the outdoor, that we could bring that way down. We would like to not actually do another pond if possible. And depending on where this goes in the near future, we may, it's up to an acre, right? And so we wanted to look at the total feasibility from water to cultivation and all of that from like, what would be the maximum appropriate in our scope on our property. And so that's kind of how some of this has been generated. We're hopeful that we would be able to reduce that water down and grow with like the numbers that you talked about, because that would save us a whole lot of construction and headache. We already have an existing 175, 200,000 gallon engineered pond, and it's gravity fed and compliant. So if we could use that, that would be great. We have a couple other supplemental sources and the ability to develop our rain catchment to, further just do right by the environment and keep water for, everyone, the fire, the animals, the plants, and we're endowed with a lot of water. We own our own properties on both sides of the South Fork of the Trinity River. And we very intentionally early on said, you know what, this is the time that we should steer away from the South Fork of the Trinity River and the riparian rights and all of that, because this was before we knew what was coming and what is now. And we decided to develop all of our stuff up above, away from that riparian area because it was more appropriate. And so anyway, my story is very long and extensive, so I could get winded. I don't want to just stick to any pertinent questions you have.
Yeah, well, I'm a water person.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to make sure that, that you understand that rainwater harvesting typically means collecting water off roofs. Like you say, the rainwater catchment idea is a whole different thing. So yeah, you got it. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
I did have a quick question in regards to your variance. I'm actually looking on a 3D view of your site on Google.
Yeah.
And I can see where, you're obviously in somewhat of a valley. It looks like on the left that the road goes up from you. Is that correct? South Fork?
The South Fork Road comes down to my property as you're driving up the South Fork Road and continues down to the neighbor property that you were asking about. And since, if you can imagine, I'm the northmost property, we started off as a mile by a mile section. And so each section is essentially a 1/4 mile wide by a 1/4 mile long. And so that sort of puts you where that other residence is. Imagine a 1/4 mile past my, would be the edge of their property. They border me and then continue.
So my question is, to try to get closer to our county regulations, I can see your parking lot, on your site plan here, and where you have existing greenhouses and proposed new ones. And
there are no proposed new greenhouses, sir.
Or proposed cultivation area, excuse me.
Yeah.
So where your proposed cultivation areas, and I'm talking about, I guess, the closest area to the South Fork. It shows it right in front of a parking area, or maybe that's where your home is. What is that going on there? Well, it says proposed.
So
There's like a white dot, little splotches everywhere.
I don't have, I guess I should get the map to see what you're looking at, because then
Yeah.
I could explain it in depth.
That's the parking area.
This here?
Okay,
Thank you. So yeah, it is called the existing parking area.
okay.
So I'm looking at that and I'm looking at an aerial on Google Earth.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, to get away from the 165 feet, why not move the proposed area to the left where your other proposed area is, to try to get more to the center of your property? And
So are you talking about down here, near my residence?
Yeah, where it's 161 feet to the property line.
So
165 feet.
Those are greenhouses.
So those are that's the existing that's the existing state compliant annual licensed operation. And it's built out, it's completely, and the reason for putting that there was that we've been operating as a mixed light, and we had a power drop a couple years ago, and we put this infrastructure where the power was. And we've learned over the years that to be successful in cannabis, you can't be really spread out. And so we've tried to shrink our footprint and bring ourselves more into where the utilities and our residents and other things naturally are. And because of the well and because of other existing infrastructure, including, I don't know if this map shows the power line and the predetermined building envelope, these things sort of evolved to land there. And so it wasn't as much like about how to move it further, because essentially when this ordinance came out, we did a study to figure out where we could put cultivation that would meet the variance requirements. And I went over that with other directors and such, and my consultants, and we found that we're going to have to cut down forests. It's a long, narrow property. And because no matter where those cultivations were on there, it was still going to be under that 500-foot setback from the property line. While at the same time, there's no developable land around us because of the zoning, because of the existing residents that have already been developed that really allow for any future development. So being that that we're familiar with the neighbor, it just, with all the things, it seemed appropriate at the time to develop it this way. And so this stuff that you're mostly looking at below the South Fork Road has been developed and operational up until this year because, well, just in the nature of the state ordinance and the mixed light. We have a contract with PG&E who came, they work a lot different than TBUD, right? So they wanted to know what we were going to use and what we were going to need. And then other development came about.
So I'd ask you the same question on your upper proposed cultivation area on the 150 by 200. It's
Right.
30,000 square feet. There seems to be adequate area, again, to the left, further away from the property line, to put that as well.
So we did the same thing. We looked at the property as a whole, because there are cultivations that have been happening there up in that area as well, that are historic in terms of our license and such. And we looked at what it would take to move it. And we looked at the topography, we looked at the environment, and we looked at what would be able to comply. And because we had already done a 3-acre conversion and other site-specific projects, it really didn't seem feasible to try to present any other plan. When you look at this property, it really doesn't, the slope, so the further you go up, I should go back to the other side. the further that you go up to the left as you're suggesting, it does sort of bowl in the sense that it does get steeper on that side on as you go up the mountain, the mile up. And this center section is, you know, where the roads and the appropriate development prior to us and stuff that we have initiated went, just because of all those reasons I said. It just, it wasn't feasible. And when consulting with our consultants, they shook their head and said, that's not a plan. We'll show it because we can get on Google Map and we can green out an area and look at your narrow 1 mile by quarter mile roughly. And they're just a 500-foot setback is a big lift, even for a 143-acre parcel.
Sure.
But because there's no developable land around us, and because we're under the impression that it's mostly designed as a nuisance mitigation, we really kind of just kept putting one foot in front of the other with our consultants in developing this plan.
Thank you for that answer.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to commend you on what looks to be a beautiful property and the project you're doing. I really have to admire your stewards of the land and respect for everything. I'm not going to try to tell you where to put your infrastructure. I just wanted to clarify, do you have $1.4 million of water or 1.4 million gallons of water storage now, or that's projected?
No, that's a proposed plan that has been submitted with the state order, just to I might use the wrong word, but to earmark what we could possibly need in the future. And similarly, that's how this is presented today.
Sure. And then your water catchment that Commissioner Fall was talking about, as you develop your property, it will only get better. Your ability to utilize the water is there. So
absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? I'm happy to answer any. I'm starting to feel quite comfortable after all these years of doing this work that I'd like to answer your questions.
Question with regards to the bioanalysis 1 and 2, and then with the Pacific Watershed Association letter.
Right.
Could you explain how this letter possibly addresses these concerns?
Sure. Well, I mean, I can do it in my layman terms, so I may need a little help back here.
Maybe Deidre might be appropriate, yeah.
But essentially, in discussion with my consultants with SHN, who I've been working with since the beginning of this project, PWA, sorry, SHN and SHN, but not directly. They've been working on my project. So PWA has been in charge of my project, and Margot, who wrote that letter, came out and did our biological, and we went all the way down to the river, which is quite a trail. I mean, this is a very steep embankment off of what is kind of a terrace where we are. We're much above, the riparian zone. And so she wrote, when she explained the snails and the frogs in the letter, she explained to me that that basically she was looking at whether they had habitat by going all the way down to the river. And as the EIR states, the South Fork of the Trinity River is habitat for these things, but it happens in very specific areas that she has, by doing the biological, she has went over that land. And so she didn't, if I get this right, she wasn't reporting on areas that weren't habitat, and she looked at the habitat. And so the letter explains how she kind of came to the conclusion of, well, the habitat is down in the South Fork. We are way above that habitat, and there is no water or environment that's conducive to those species, is, in a nutshell of what my biologists are saying. Maybe there's some even on Zoom that might comment, but essentially she was just saying that from her expertise, she didn't quite understand the sort of broad stroke that this mitigation came onto this document. She felt like it was really just because our property does sit near that habitat, but our developed cultivation area doesn't. And it meets many riparian setbacks that also mitigate that. And because grading and other issues have been already done and finished for many years, there's sort of established ground that also doesn't lend itself to that. It doesn't have a woody area or a, we're talking a gravel packed zone that's like really hard, dense ground that we're on in some areas. So,
Hey, thank you for that. And so maybe Skylar or environmental health, is this analysis appropriate? Is that appropriate analysis for these biomitigations? And if so, should this be like put into the document?
It's what was passed out. So.
This side loan didn't get it.
Oh, we haven't even received it. I'm sorry. You didn't. Yeah, I'm sorry.
2 seconds to flip through this one real quick. Go ahead, Scott.
If we would like Gary from SHN, who authored those two conditions, to speak to why they're written the way they are, then we can also do that if you'd like.
It'd be nice if Gary could read this as well, but we're kind of on the stand right here.
No, it's sorry. Yeah, would we like him to speak though?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sure.
Hi, this is Gary Reese from SHN. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I understand what PWA is saying in their determination, but the reality is that the county has circulated a CEQA document with these mitigation measures. And you don't just delete mitigation measures at a hearing like this. That's not how CEQA works. So I would suggest that you keep them in, and if the biologist for the project wants to write a determination to county staff and basically explain why there's no habitat in this area and essentially these aren't required, they can do that. I mean, if you look at the Trinity bristle snail mitigation measure, it says if suitable habitat is present. And the same can really be said for foothill yellow-legged frog, who, they can use upland areas away from riparian habitat, significantly away from riparian habitat. But, if the biologist is saying that the topographic difference between the river and that habitat and these cultivation areas is so significant that the habitat doesn't exist, that's fine. And they can do that. And the county can consider that and say, okay, that's sufficient. We don't need you to do pre-construction surveys for these species, but I wouldn't suggest removing the mitigation measures from this document that has been circulated for public review. If you were going to do something like that, really the analysis should be revised and the mitigation measures removed and the document should be recirculated so that the public has the benefit of seeing the revised analysis that states that these are not necessary. But I doubt that's something the applicant wants to do, so I do not suggest removing these mitigation measures.
Thank you for that answer. Mr. Khan?
Could I just make a comment about that?
Yes.
I completely agree with what I just heard. And it's in line with what we're asking. A lot of this, really what I've learned, painfully, is that the biological assessments, depending on the ones that you have to do, really have windows of time that you can do them. And the biologists have to look at the weather. It's not just an arbitrary date. And so in the interest of keeping our project moving forward, we realized this just like a year ago, or 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, that we were outside the biological window before already. And so that's why we're a little sensitive to that, is that we're really just looking for what he just said, and that is if staff sees an appropriateness with our qualified biologists and their recommendations, we just want to support that and follow that fully.
I appreciate your commitment to doing it right.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wasn't asking for anything to be struck. I just, reading this over, was just wanting to see if it was addressing those mitigations. But thank you, Gary, for that clarity.
Is there any other comments or questions for staff or the applicant?
So what happens if the LSAA is not approved? I mean, I know it's pending and all that, but is it appropriate to make it clear to the applicant that, that needs to be approved? If not, he would need to modify the permit? No?
You're right on the page with me. I felt the same way when I turned this in last fall. And I kept going back with them and saying, where is this? You said it was coming. And they finally got to a point and they were like, look, it clearly says that you are completely compliant and we're waiting on the county to do their due diligence so that we can actually react. So so in my definition, they weren't saying it's an if or, they're saying this is a community matter that needs to be addressed before we will, before we will reissue it. And she made it really clear to me that I shouldn't be concerned with that, and neither should you.
Sounds like a catch-22 there. So, Christy?
Yeah, Christy Anderson, Environmental Health. I just wanted to address that this is standard practice with LSAAs and Fish and Wildlife. They were waiting on our CEQA document to be complete, et cetera, et cetera. So it did leave us all in this weird spot, and I understand why the cultivators were a little concerned about that. I wanted to address one of your questions earlier. I remember visiting Mr. Khan's site years ago when the cannabis program first started. And so I looked back through my email and did find his regional water quality enrollment, which is before the state water quality enrollment, So if you would like me to email it to all of you guys or show you.
As long as you know it's there in the file, that's perfect.
Yeah. Through my 80,000 email, I found it.
All right.
Kudos.
So.
Cool. All right. I just, the only comment I had, just it's not something to change anything, but because I am a firefighter, is other cannabis operators have had a specific tank for fire suppression. So it's not integrated with their irrigation system so much. So the firefighters just have that level of confidence that that water will be there. And so just something to think about.
On that note, rather than having 2,500 that's set up for it, they could have.
The nature of the geography of our project and where the collection points of where the two LSAA diversion points have been approved, that's way up on our property. So much so that we have to fill tanks as a means of zeroing back out our gravity. So we don't create a situation where our pressure is too high. So and it also with any chances of a leak happening or something with the gravity system. So what we have are redundancies built into the system. So I can assure you that not only is the pond capable of them taking water out of, but also there are tanks that have valves that are off that they can also along the road that is listed on there. So I would have no problem with that. But after discussing this multiple times with CAL FIRE as they came through and looked at the buried lines and such, it seemed to meet their requirements. But so it would be really fairly simple to add another tank. As you see, we have more tanks that we have suggested to add. And those would be the kinds of things that we would really focus on fire in terms of making sure that anything like that was met, and as well, any future rain catchment type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, ponds, you have to back up within 20 to 30 feet, the maximum that you can suck water to fill a fire engine is 30 feet, and it's got to be hard packed where you can get your engine to the edge of the pond. So I don't know about ponds.
Yeah, it's really, the tanks and the pond are not a problem.
Okay. Anyway, just something to think about. Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments?
I guess this is just a nuance question with regards to the transition from a type 2 existing cultivation to the expansion. He's going to have possibly up to 2 years, if not just 1 year to get this project underway. Will that initial 10,000 square foot license, will he can be able to continue cultivating in the original area while it is built out to the acre? Or does that discontinue the initial one to start the next project? Do you know what I mean?
So if I may, through the chair, Director Connell, Cannabis Division. So what we'd be granting here, should this commission decide to approve this project, would be cultivation up to 1 acre. So if he were to do anything less than that, he's still within his right under this entitlement. And so if there were additional things that need to happen before he could fully maximize that 1 acre permit, he would need to complete those in order to be eligible to essentially cultivate, right? But as we see it in our department, we would be issuing him a license and he would be able to cultivate up to that 1 acre threshold. Anything below that would just be the applicant's discretion.
Yeah.
Which is why the verbiage cultivation should be added to the language.
The
So
conditions.
it clarifies that. So the following conditions of approval shall be satisfied prior to the cultivation or issuance of building permits.
Under Exhibit A.
I'm tracking.
Perfect. Okay, is there any other questions for staff or the applicant? Commissioners? Okay, do I have a motion on the table?
Okay. I just just brief discussion. So I just want to, it kind of bothered me with the staff saying that the criteria, the variance criteria for cannabis cultivation is a neighbor nuisance issue. I mean, according to our zoning ordinance, variances are supposed to be for a unique hardship, where you can't meet it because of the topography. So I think Mr. Khan has pretty much demonstrated that here. I think there could have been some tweaking, but I hope the staff doesn't go down that path of saying, well, as long as they're not bothering the neighbors, it's okay to issue a variance, because that's really not what the ordinance, variances are supposed to be, it's a financial hardship or it's impossible to meet, and I would encourage sticking to what's written in the ordinance.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, we really should be trying to get projects within our ordinance and not giving exceptions every time somebody doesn't want to be in the ordinance. I mean, it has to be, and I can see on Google Earth that you are in a pocket. You definitely have some reason for what you're doing. But just to say because the neighbor doesn't mind it, well, the neighbor might not be the same neighbor next year, and we're creating space there for problems. So I would encourage that as well, is to try to get these projects to where they meet those requirements when they come in. So
what we're saying, or what we're seeing is even for these 1 acre licenses, even with the largest parcels, there was one on Hayfork Summit, I think it was an entire section, 350 acres. It still needed a variance. And so the 500-foot setback is onerous. From the property line, it's a real challenge that even the largest of parcels, we're yet to see one parcel that is able to fit within that criteria come before us.
it's not a matter of whether it's owners or not. It is in our code, and that is what we're here to uphold, is our code. It's not our opinion or what we think or don't think about our code. So I just encourage us to stick to our code. If the code is rewritten, then we can talk about that.
And that's why the variance was directly put in for this type of thing, mitigation.
Any other discussion?
Nope.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I'll take a crack at it. A motion to grant the staff's recommendation to adopt the CEQA determination of mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, MMRP, as well as to approve the conditional use permit and variance, CCUPT 3-2019-021, based on the recommended findings in the resolution 2022-09 and subject to the conditions of approval set forth in Exhibit A to Resolution 2022-09, adding the initial expiration date of 2 years.
And friendly amendment and inserting the following conditions of approval shall be satisfied prior to cultivation and issuance of any building permits.
Can I have a second?
Second.
You have a roll call?
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharp, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Heaton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Oop, I lost my speaker. 5-0, project approved.
Thank you. Good job on your project. Good job, staff. This is a nice project.
I just want to say thank you, and it's been many years at getting to this point, and I'm really impressed with seeing 5 people on a cannabis issue vote, and I just really appreciate that.
Okay, moving on to planning commissioner reports. Commissioners, do you have anything to report?
I don't know if it's a report, but it's a question for staff. What's the rotation for the next chair and vice chair on this board? Please.
Duncan's next.
If I'm still in the seat as of January, I'll be the chair, and who will be the vice chair? Commissioner
I
Fall?
believe Commissioner Fall.
Thank you.
So I could just, I have more details on October 14th and 15th, Planning Commissioners Association Conference, but I've talked about it. And so the county should be receiving a letter in the mail about registration and participation. And all the details are all dialed, and it's going to be a really good event. I'm really looking forward to it, and I appreciate the county support in helping us to go down to this conference and learn from other commissioners in other counties.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntosh. Is there any other reports? Okay, I have a couple. I'm going to encourage everybody, and I know this is a conflict with the regional thing, but I have been, in communication with my supervisor, and it's pretty much a unanimous decision that this commission needs training in the biggest way, and I tend to agree. And so I'm going to encourage everybody to try to seek it, get it as quickly as possible, just so we can operate in a more professional, efficient manner, as none of us have very much experience. So I just want to relay those thoughts to you. And I know, Deb, you're working on getting people signed up. I think Commissioner Fall has already signed up and I've expressed to you to go ahead and sign me up for the training in October.
Yes.
Okay, and I would just encourage, and I know it is a conflict, but if you can't make that one, please try to get one under your hood before the end of the year. As commissioners, I think this is probably the most important part of our job, is to make sure that we understand it and know how to do it. So I just encourage you all to do that.
Fringe of the one in Humboldt County?
Yeah, it's the same weekend as the regional, and it is, I understand it's a big deal, and so I get it, and so again, I just encourage everybody to try to find one that you can get to before the end of the year. Also, I'd like to bring up the discussion of possibly moving our meeting times to an earlier time. It has, it is a wear on folks. I think both staff, and I know for me and for other people that have to travel from long distances to go to 10, 11 o'clock at night. I don't think, I personally am not very effective. I start my day at 4 a.m. I'm at my best at 7 a.m. By this time at night, I'm pretty much marshmallowed. So, I've asked around a bit. I've checked with other counties, other planning commissions. They're kind of all over the gamut, but a majority of them do meet during regular business hours. It helps staff perform. It gives them more time. And I think it might make for a better planning commission meeting as far as clarity and being crisp in thought and verb. So I just wanted to get a straw poll of your other planning commissioners, what you thought, and staff as well, what your thoughts were on that. So, what are your thoughts, Skylar, Deborah?
You've been running the poll.
Chair and planning commissioners, if there's interest amongst the planning commissioners to change the time, staff believes that if we agendize this item for discussion at maybe not the next meeting, but maybe the meeting after that, and then we could put it to a vote to establish a new time for the planning commission to meet.
I think that's a great idea. Let's go ahead and do that. So, are we in agreement with that, commissioners, to agendize that?
One thing I was going to say is the fourth Thursday of the month, I am the chair of the Fire Safe Council, and we meet at 1 o'clock. So 4 o'clock, I can meet, but otherwise I'm going to have to resign from that.
Gotcha. So I think we can agendize it and then have a full discussion on maybe possible times and or days even.
Okay.
If we're going to move the time, we can look at pretty much all options, including days, depending on, and I would encourage staff in the interim to maybe look at different options for days as well, just to see when we could get this room, just so we're not pigeonholed to a Thursday.
Yeah, that might incorporate a change in the resolution established the second and fourth Thursdays of the month.
Yeah. So I just want to be able to look at it so if we can have the information, at least we have some ideas and options that we can toss around. Okay. With that, I'd like to bring it to staff for staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Director Connell, if I can start. I believe it was maybe the previous commission meeting or one before that, but I had been asked how many CUPs and director's use permits were in the rears, essentially meaning that we were still working on them. Our amazing planner, Skylar, while not only preparing for tonight's meeting, also managed to capture all of this information. And so what I have before me is we are still processing through about 10 conditional use permits. She has 12 on her list, but one of them is actively in litigation and the other one is reconsidering their interest in actually finalizing that application process. So we'll cap that at 10. And then for director's use permits, for most of what I'm looking at are RV occupation of a construction site. So I would imagine that that's probably for residential buildings or post-fire cleanup. And so with that number in DUPs, we're looking at 20 DUPs that are still to be processed through. So that's a total of about 30 projects total as far as what Skylar's working through.
So Lisa had suggested potentially somehow or other revising the rules or whatever so that we wouldn't have to require director's use permits for these temporary RVs. Is that an option?
I will tell you that at this point in time, we don't have an actual planning director. So if there was maybe Skylar and myself can kind of look into if there's a different approach. But at this point in time, without actually having, actual planning staff and a fully staffed planning department, I don't want to speak for Ed, but it would be my recommendation that we probably stick to what we have until we have adequate staff in those positions, because making any change really only falls on Skylar's shoulders. She is the lone planner that you have. And so any of those shifts or changes would ultimately be her responsibility to investigate, prepare, and present. And so I think it would be far better for us right now as we
low priority. Okay, gotcha.
Anything else, Director Connell?
I have nothing else, but I'm sure my interim director does.
Ed Presley, interim director, deputy director of the building planning department. So another very good meeting. I really appreciate the dialogue back and forth. I love to see a project come through like that where the individual, the applicant, can stand up and actually answer all the questions, because there is a real vested interest in everybody taking ownership of this whole process. So I really appreciated that. As far as my update for the department, you have the general plan update presentation you got earlier. We're really excited about that. That's really going to kind of pave the way for the course of Trinity County. I hope everybody, when they do come out to the different districts, I really, really hope that we get a good showing in those, because they're going to come out and do presentations and do pop-up. Just show up and start asking people questions and see how they're doing, just like they're doing at the fair right now for the next few days. We did interview a couple of assistant planners, and so we made an offer a couple of days ago, and he is seeking housing options, which we kind of is right in the wheelhouse of the Planning Commission, seeking housing options here in Weaverville or close nearby so that we can get him on board. So hopefully that's going to happen pretty soon. And then I think the last thing I really have here is, because everything went so smoothly tonight, you guys are going to have the 28th off. We're not going to have a planning commission meeting that night.
Making my day. Thank you for that. Appreciate the report. Is there anything else to report from staff? With that,
I have a question for staff.
go ahead.
A few months ago, we gave direction to staff to reestablish, what was the board or the commission to help expedite this, what is that?
Subdivision committee.
Subdivision committee.
Subdivision review
Has there
committee.
been any process forward on initiating that?
If I may, through the chair, I can say no, there really hasn't. As I've explained before, Skylar is your single staff planner in the planning department. So any ask that you have, you're asking that one person, which means in order for her to do that, projects will come to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
And her time and her effort will be spent in investigating those things. So I would say that since I've been here since March, if you allow us to fully staff our departments, I think that we'll be able to better serve this community and this board and this commission. But with just it being Skylar, it is extremely hard to get to all of these secondary and tertiary kind of things that definitely need to happen. But it is something that we are actively trying to seek out and fix, because staff problems cannot be the only problems. Those are ones that we should easily be able to fix. And between myself and Director Presley, we've done an amazing job of getting people here so that we can start to address these things.
Certainly. I just want to make sure it doesn't fall off the radar, because that committee is established to assist staff and help lighten your load. And so I think that once it is established, we will be able to see more projects move forward. So thank you for your work.
I just have a quick question, since we're talking about numbers. How many cannabis licenses have been issued? Please.
About 10, I think.
So current total of issue licenses is 19. I would like to caveat that we do have 25 approved projects, and I would imagine a little bit more tomorrow, but I haven't been in my office because I've been in meetings. So we are on the uptick of issuing licenses and getting them through the process.
Perfect. Thank you, John. How many of those are in Ruth area?
To be honest with you, Commissioner, I do not know that off the top of my head, but I can do the research. I can get back to you.
I was just curious. Thank you.
And just FYI for you guys, all of these are printed in the newspaper every week, so you can keep up with that if you want.
APN number.
Yep. You can look it up on Parcel Viewer, and it's printed in the paper every week. Okay, with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Motion, meeting adjourned.
I thought they were gonna leave you hanging. Normally we're pretty quick on that one. There's a second, third.